Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Obito Sensei in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Obito Sensei Chapter 83. Needs to be precise with their rage. Kushiro was a beautiful town, though it would soon be scarred by war. Sitting on the coast of the Dark Sea on the land of Frost's northern coast and bisected by a mountain-born river that flowed right through it, the town had been a center of trade before the war. It was thanks to that critical location, with access to the sea, the river, and multiple roads that made their way both south and west towards the center of the Land of Frost, that Kushiro had been selected by Kumigakure and the Land of Lightning as an important distribution center and supply depot out of which all the necessities for making war constantly flowed. Its lovely port markets had been torn down, and hasty stock houses erected in their place. On the 1st of May, Kushiro was hosting precisely 478 ninja, as well as just over 2,000 of the Land of Lightning's professional soldiers. By the end of the day, the number of ninja would shrink to 93. It was a similar culling to what the original population of nearly 25,000 civilians had endured, more than 15,000 of which had been driven out of the town over the course of April, leaving behind critical labor for the docks and daily running of the town that had been press-ganged by soldiers from the Land of Lightning. Nearly 10,000 non-combatants was an uncomfortably large number for the nation of Rain, who had come to the Land of Frost both to punish the Hidden Cloud's arrogance and to assist in building their reputation among the minor nations. Completely leveling Kushiro was well within the capabilities of the Rain forces, but went against their strategic objectives. It was the threat of collateral damage that forced Konan and her lieutenants to settle on the assault plan that they did. It was a battle plan not unknown among ninja, a low-altitude airdrop, intended to compensate for Rain's inferior numbers, since their ninja were outnumbered more than 3 to 1. The difference was in its scale. Ninja that could fly were a rarity, but Rain had brought 3 of them, and both Konan and Deidara had the capability to carry a good number of ninja themselves. As such, the attack on the heart of Kushiro would deposit 50 ninja directly into the center of town, a sudden and violent assault that would rely on shock and awe to drive the Cloud defenders to the outskirts, where they would be sandwiched between the other 95 assaulting Rain ninja to break, surrender, flee, or die. Because of their skills, both Team 7 and Jiraiya were made a part of the drop force despite their abrupt arrival. So to prove their sincerity to Rain's cause, at 6:47 in the morning they were immediately thrown into the heat of battle. ####. If Sasuke had been a little bit more prideful, he would have been embarrassed by his undignified delivery to the town. The air assault consisted of 3 flights. The largest contingent of Rain ninja were with Deidara, who had conjured a tremendous clay dragon large enough to seat 30 of them. It soared through the air with an ungainly grace, Deidara commanding it from the front with a delighted grin as they all broke from the cover of the low clouds and dived on the town of Kushiro as one. The dragon led the way, and shouts of alarm and commands could be very faintly heard from the buildings far below. The second contingent were ninja who had been gifted paper wings by Konan. They included Jiraiya and Sakura, and they were more gliders than anything, though they occasionally flapped with wills of their own as they controlled the fall of Rain's ninja into Kushiro. It was a surreal and surely terrifying sight, and Sasuke was sure that stories of winged ninja would spread far and wide after this battle. The last group was himself and Naruto. Fia had her arms wrapped about both their waists, holding them into a death grip as her wings beat faster and faster, escalating to a deafening tempo as they dove on the city and the ninja below began to respond. Thanks to his Sharingan, he could see the defenders scrambling into place, leaping up to rooftops and preparing jutsu and weapons. Several began to charge the iron wrists he had been warned about, channeling chakra to the metal gauntlets as they prepared to fire. "Get ready!" Fia yelled. Sasuke could picture her wide grin. Another second passed, and then they were only 50 feet above the highest buildings. Most in Kushiro were 2 or 3 stories, classically constructed of stone and wood to evoke a more peaceful time. He glanced over at Naruto, who was wearing a grin that certainly matched Fia's. Despite being catapulted into a war zone, his friend was having the time of his life. "Go!" Fia released them, pushing them out as her wings stopped beating and she transitioned into a free fall herself. Ninja fell from the sky all across Kushiro, and Sasuke caught Sakura landing on a rooftop nearby out of the corner of his eye. Her Akatsuki uniform fluttered in the wind, pushing her hood back, and her paper wings crumbled away as she landed with a flying kick that sent a cloud ninja tumbling off the roof. Jiraiya was right at her side, tossing out a fireball that warded off the other enemies as Sakura threw herself towards them. The Toad Sage was already running through the hand signs for a summoning jutsu, and as he struck the roof, there was an explosion of smoke and blood. Sasuke landed in a courtyard alongside Naruto, tumbled, and started running. There were screams everywhere, chaos reigning as the battle suddenly kicked off. Desperate shouts, ninjutsu declarations, and the high-pitched whine and crash of iron wrists filled the air, and he set himself south, intent on their objective. They'd been told to push into the center of Kushiro and take out any cloud ninja they came across. It was a hunt and kill mission, simple as that. From the roof Sakura had landed on came a flood of toads, hundreds of the things of every color. Most of them were only the size of Sasuke's hand, but as he leapt down into the streets they began charging forward. This close to the docks there were many workers in the streets who had been heading towards their shifts at the warehouses, and all of them were fleeing or freezing up as ninja landed around or on top of them. The toads weren't targeting the defending ninja, rather, they went after the panicking civilians. Whenever one drew close their mouths swelled beyond physical possibility, and they swallowed them whole. It probably wasn't helping the panic, Sasuke thought, but sealing the Frost citizens away was definitely better than leaving them out in the middle of a war zone. They'd be returned unharmed after the battle, probably in better shape than their home. Jiraiya had taken pains to convince the Rain Ninja not to unleash their more destructive techniques until at least part of the town had been cleared. Sasuke had no idea if it would work, but he had to pray that it would. There was no time for much thought or much prayer though. Kushiro exploded into activity, Cloud Ninja and Lightning's soldiers filling the streets, attacking from the rooftops and trying to repulse the sudden assault. A beam of energy fired by an iron wrist missed him by inches, and Sasuke's conscious thoughts shut down as he devoted himself entirely to the battle. The ninja that had fired at him cursed as Sasuke burst through the roof, seizing his arm and ripping the metal apparatus off it. He started to counterattack, but compared to Sasuke, he was painfully slow. Before his lightning clone could manifest, Sasuke had already driven a kunai through the man's hand. His other hand came up holding a knife of his own and a paper bird slammed into it, driving it back and wrapping around it to bind his fingers together. Konan was everywhere in the battle, making small moves like that to protect her shinobi. It was the most ridiculous force multiplier Sasuke had ever seen. As the Cloud Ninja screamed and cursed, trying to kick Sasuke off the roof, he swept the man's legs and caught him with a stomp to the skull. The ninja broke through the wood paneling, smashed face first down to the first floor. After pausing to make sure he wasn't moving, Sasuke moved on. He found Naruto down on the street, sending shadow clones off to where other Rain Ninja seemed to be struggling. A dozen soldiers attacked him, perhaps mistaking him for an easy target by his age, and Naruto knocked 3 of them out with a single attack each. The rest turned and ran. He looked up at Sasuke and gave a thumbs up, and Sasuke returned it, scanning the town. Explosions blossomed across nearby streets. Deidara's dragon had returned to the sky and rained down small clay creatures that went off with the force of massive bombs, leveling whole buildings and flattening some of the trees that lined the streets with pressure waves. Sasuke. Sakura was behind him now, Fu at her side, her fists stained with blood. 2 long sparkling blades of sinuous water and ice flowed from Sakura's hands like an extension of her body, and she jerked her head towards the explosions as Jiraiya raced past them all, pushing south and kicking a Cloud Ninja that leapt to intercept him clean through a nearby wall. Let's go. It was information overload as they pushed south. So much was happening that Sasuke was sure if he hadn't been born to his Sharingan all the information it was capturing would have knocked him out. The Rain Strike Force spread out, their initial drop almost a complete success. Mayhem reigned in Kushiro. Cloud Ninja were retreating, letting off constant suppressive fire from their iron wrists. The blasts weren't deterring their pursuers, especially when most of them were clumsily telegraphing their shots and the ones that weren't had their aim thrown off by swarms of paper birds that blocked their vision and jostled their arms. Sasuke realized in the span of a mere minute that the more experienced Cloud Ninja were not relying on the technology. It was a potent weapon, but not reliable enough to replace ninjutsu, which the older ninja universally fought with. In the sky above, he saw something bizarre. Deidara was being chased by a woman, a Cloud Ninja that wore a long black cloak and ran on the air like it was solid ground. Deidara was peppering her with explosives, but she was firing darts back, small bursts of lightning chakra that neutralized his bombs and kept them from going off. It seemed like a nearly even battle, especially when she managed to leap onto his dragon and spear its head with a lightning blade with one hand while she fought Deidara off with the other. That immediately changed when Conan arrived. The Omekage swooped to Deidara's rescue like a paper angel. The Cloud Ninja was tackled off the dragon, but Conan melted away into loose sheets just seconds later and Deidara was able to attack. The Cloud Ninja survived a barrage of explosives, shielded by a wall of chakra-infused dust, the same material that she had been walking on to enable her impossible flight. But with Conan there, Sasuke knew the ninja was out of the fight. He shifted his attention as she was surrounded by gleaming sharp paper birds, torn back to the brutal street-to-street fighting as they stabbed, punched, blasted, and stomped their way through the Cloud Ninja, their enemy desperately trying to reorganize. It was effortless to him. Even without using his Mangekyo, these ninja from Cloud could not stand against him. He was faster, stronger, more decisive. Was this how Taka felt? Was this where he had gotten the confidence to turn on the clan, or had that come from Madara's shadow? Sasuke knew he wasn't invincible, but this was the first battle he'd participated in where he felt the delusion drift by. The gulf between him and Itachi might not be a cliff anymore, merely a hill. But would Itachi even think about this sort of thing? Was that what separated them, a self-awareness that would always hold him back? Drawn into his inner world with his body moving on its own, Sasuke's assault continued for another 2 minutes before he was rudely yanked back to reality. A torrent of tan liquid suddenly burst from a nearby building, pouring out over the street. 2 nearby rain ninja were sucked down into the muck and suffocated in an instant. Struggling beneath the thick goop, Sasuke and his team were quick enough to get out of the way, leaping up onto nearby walls and roofs as they scanned for the threat. Stupid. Itachi never would have been distracted like that. He would have been able to warn his comrades that the attack was coming. Sasuke's Sharingan was already analyzing the jutsu, a mix of fire and earth, almost surely a Kekkai Genkai. As more Cloud Ninja arrived from every direction, his eyes were drawn to the one leading them, a tall man with spiky black hair, sporting an eye patch to match Jiraiya's own. Toad Sage, the Cloud Ninja, an obvious leader, maybe the leader of the Kushiro contingent, called out. You and your ninja have one chance to surrender. This isn't Konoha's war. We're not ninja of Konoha, Jiraiya called back without hesitation. For a second, both sides froze, waiting for orders as the buildings that had been submerged in the bizarre rubbery liquid the Cloud Commander had created began to sink and melt, heated by the boiling tar they were suddenly surrounded by. Very well, the commander decided, throwing out 2 quick hand signs at his subordinates, hidden commands. Then die. Sasuke charged forward, set on assassinating the man, and the battlefield was thrown into chaos once more. ####. When things got going in earnest, Naruto was surprised at how well he was handling himself. He'd already taken out a bunch of soldiers and several Cloud Ninja, all older than him. He'd known from experience that he was good at being ninja, but something about an open war zone had been more intimidating. When Konoha had been invaded, he'd been almost helpless against the Akatsuki team sent after his mother, despite all his growth. He had expected that the ninja here would be on another level, and that he'd be fighting for his life. And he was, as he dodged a lightning bolt that blew a hole in the wall behind him and slammed a Rasengan into a Cloud Ninja's side, sending him spinning down the street with a scream. It wasn't like he wasn't having to try his best. But he wasn't panicking, and no one who'd attacked him yet felt like they were moving too fast or too skillfully for him to handle. It hadn't been that long ago, really, that he couldn't see his dad move, but that wasn't the case anymore. He was old enough, experienced enough, to be a real ninja in a real battle. It helped that the Cloud Ninja were obviously freaking out. They clearly hadn't expected a bunch of enemies to basically appear in the middle of the town, or for the Rain Ninja to be as skilled as they were. Naruto's shadow clones had spread out throughout the town, and through their returned memories he could tell that Rain's casualties so far hadn't been bad, with very few fatalities. Here, with his team and Jiraiya plus a couple others against what seemed to be Cloud's leadership corp, that could change. Sasuke and Jiraiya charged the leader, trying to bury him in the rubber goop he'd sprayed everywhere, but he was doing a good job of holding them off with his subordinates' help. Seeing that, Naruto decided to focus on the other Cloud Ninja. The less enemies, the better. Sakura had made the same decision, and now they were fighting across the street from one another, beating back squads of Cloud Ninja that called down elemental jutsu and threw blasts of energy from their iron wrists with abandon. Naruto saw how the iron wrists could be an issue, but so long as he stayed close to Cloud Ninja, they couldn't shoot him without risking their friends. He leapt from roof to roof, smashing aside anyone who got in his way. One older ninja with a bushy mustache charged directly at him and Naruto met him head-on. The man had some kind of earth jutsu that he led with like a battering ram, creating a shield of stone in front of him that transformed him into a juggernaut. Naruto felt sure from the man's confidence the shield could shrug off most ninjutsu, and at the speed he was moving even a ninja would be pasted by a direct hit. Just a couple weeks ago, he would have had to run away, or overwhelm the man with clones. But today, he just sucked in a deep breath, chakra burning up and down his arm like the most intense lactic acid in existence, and pushed it all out in a single punch with a roar of effort. The punch shattered the stone ram and the arm behind it. The Cloud Ninja flew back, skipping across the roof like a stone over water and vanishing over the edge, still coordinated enough to catch the ledge with his intact hand and swing out of sight. Naruto saw his eyes before he vanished. The man was in shock, mentally and medically. Out of the fight, at least for now. He glanced around, trying to take in the situation. Most of the other Cloud Ninja were gone, but so were many of the Rain Ninja, some buried in the tar and others bleeding out across the rooftops. Naruto started rushing from body to body, applying triage where he could. One woman grasped at him, and he caught her arm and settled it down by her side, barely sparing a word as he closed the hole that exposed her ribs. "Stay still," was all he told her. By this point, he barely noticed how gruesome his job was. At least he'd gotten really good at it. He lost track of Sakura in the chaos, but he wasn't worried about her. Since they'd dropped, she'd been fighting so quickly and cleanly that it had surprised even him. Sakura had been the one to want to come here in the first place, and she was clearly prepared for it. Jiraiya and Sasuke were still fighting. One of Sasuke's arms was coated in rubber, stuck to his side like a weird tan cast, but he wasn't moving like he was in pain, it wasn't boiling like the stuff on the ground. Maybe it couldn't be hot and sticky at the same time. He and Jiraiya chased after the Cloud Commander, who slid across the rooftops on rapidly forming paths created by his bloodline as he hurled ninja tools and barked orders into his radio. Naruto started heading in that direction, looking to cut him off, but Jiraiya gestured him away. He wasn't sure why. "Now it's your turn to surrender." Ah, that was why. Jiraiya delivered the ultimatum with so much confidence, but the Cloud Commander just looked bemused. "Before more of your men die." "That's impossible," the man said with a shake of his head. "Sorry. I can't hold a grudge against you all when we fired the first shot, but the Raikage himself gave me this assignment. I couldn't betray him or lightning." Another torrent of tar emerged, submerging an entire building as Sasuke and Jiraiya leapt away. Maybe in another dash. Naruto felt a flash of deja vu as Sakura appeared behind the man, leaping silently to flank him. Nonetheless, the ninja had great instincts. He drew a rubber wall behind him before he'd finished turning, and as Sakura's blade flashed out like a spear, the wall caught the attack. It distended and pushed towards the ninja's heart before he counterattacked, the wall leaping forward and wrapping around Sakura. Naruto couldn't see if she made it out or not before it closed. "Hey!" Naruto shouted. They were all charging now, even a ninja as skilled as this man couldn't fight them all at once. He threw a kunai, adding a touch of super strength. The knife let out a sonic boom, but once more the commander drew his hand across the air, leaving behind a rubber barrier. The knife slammed into the wall and, to Naruto's shock, bounced back with twice as much force. He didn't have time to dodge, it smashed into his shoulder and sent him spinning to the ground with a grunt of pain, piercing clean through his vest and scraping off the bone. A nasty hit, but nothing he couldn't fix. Sasuke arrived, and the commander moved like a man possessed, blocking a flurry of attacks and a fireball before locking Sasuke's other arm to his side with more rubber as they leapt from building to building like violent pinballs. Sasuke ducked and weaved, continuing to fight with just his legs until the commander threw him off balance. He used a normal earth jutsu, raising a wall between the two of them, and kicked right through it. At close range even the Sharingan couldn't keep Sasuke untouched, and he took a rock to the face and was driven back. But then Jiraiya arrived and the Cloud Commander was finally overwhelmed, barely dodging a Raiznon the size of his body and taking a razor-sharp strand of hair clean through the arm. He stumbled off the roof and drew a dome of rubber over him, keeping Jiraiya from following for a brief second. By this point, Naruto was finally back on his feet and trying to pull the knife from his shoulder. It was so deep that he could barely grab the hilt. The commander looked over at him, calculating. Naruto could tell he was weighing his chances of going after the most injured target, and he grimaced. "I wouldn't dash," he said, before the man launched at him, throwing himself over the alley separating the two buildings. At that moment, three things happened. First, Naruto pulled the knife out with a surge of adrenaline, preparing to defend himself but feeling slower than he needed to be. Second, the commander created a rubber whip between his hands and threw it out to snare Naruto. Most likely, he was going to take him hostage to try and negotiate with Jiraiya. Not a bad idea, though Naruto wouldn't make it easy for him. Last, Sakura appeared like an angry black and crimson ghost. She leapt up from the alley, having silently retreated and relocated. She was at the commander's side in less than a heartbeat, and he jerked, having just enough time to look over at her with obvious shock. She placed her hand to his chest, and a blade of water and ice burst forth. It punched directly through his heart, and then vanished in welter of red and white. There were no last words or surprised declarations. The Cloud Commander hit the roof, rolled, and lay still at Naruto's feet, his mouth opening and closing as he tried to take a final breath. When he looked up, there was no malice in his eyes as Naruto had seen in many other ninjas. Rather, there was only a look of resignation and, after a second, acceptance. The Cloud Ninja closed his eyes for good, and Sakura landed beside the body, looking it over before glancing up at Naruto. "You okay?" she asked, and he mutely nodded, laying a hand over his pierced shoulder and starting to mend the wound. The arm would be out of commission for the day at least, but the bleeding was easy enough to manage. "Yeah," he said, grimacing at how hoarse his voice was. "Didn't think he could bounce it back like that." "Thanks." His eyes were drawn to the body once more, and despite all his senses buzzing and pain throbbing through his shoulder, Naruto found himself staring at it instead of getting a move on. It hadn't been the wrong thing to do. The man had been trying to kill them, and had killed a couple of the Rain Ninja they'd been fighting alongside, people whose names Naruto hadn't even a chance to learn. He'd been leading an invading force that had taken over this town, taken over the country really, and despite being matter-of-fact about his job, that didn't excuse doing something so obviously wrong. So why did he feel like this? Where was the hesitation coming from? It wasn't the dead man, Naruto realized. It was Sakura. Even if it had been justified, there'd been something about the way she'd done it that rubbed him wrong. She'd killed him so quickly, so easily. It had almost been dismissive. That was the ninja ideal for a lot of people, but it had never really been Sakura's. She wasn't the kind of person to kill a man without thinking about it before and after. But now, she suddenly was. Was that why she had wanted to come to Frost? Had she realized she could kill like that now? Plenty had changed and they'd been through so much. Killing Haku especially had changed her. But was this part of that, or was it another thing about her that had been fundamentally altered without Naruto noticing? He was still missing something, and he needed to find out what. "Naruto?" He looked up, finding her still there. "Are you hurt?" He shook his head. "Well, a little," he amended, pulling his hand away from his shoulder. "But I'll be fine." He cocked an ear, looking and listening. "It's gotten quiet." "Yeah." Sakura looked up, where Deidara, Fu, and Konan were sweeping through the sky and descending on pockets of resistance. "I think that was their main force. We should start clearing buildings, they'll have left behind some traps and assassins." "You're good." "I'm good," he lied, looking for Sasuke. Jiraiya was fussing over him, and Naruto called over. "Need help? Do you have any lightning jutsu?" Sasuke called out, sounding frustrated, and Naruto couldn't help but snigger at the image of him standing there looking pissed with his arms glued to his sides. "'Cause that's all that's going to get this off." "Well now hold on," Jiraiya said thoughtfully. "What if dash?" He pressed a hand glowing with elemental chakra to the rubber, and it convulsed and doubled in size. Sasuke wheezed, his upper body being crushed. "Ah shit," Jiraiya muttered, looking embarrassed. He waved at the two of them, pasting on a carefree grin. "You two go on. I'll get him to someone that can help." Jiraiya was doing his best to keep them all safe, but he understood the reality that Sasuke was more vulnerable than the rest of them now. Naruto could see that instantly. He threw a two-finger salute as the Toad Sage picked Sasuke up like a piece of ungainly luggage and leapt away across the rooftops. Sakura was watching with a small grin when Naruto turned to her. His heart skipped a beat. It was fine. If she could still smile like that, everything was fine. "All right," he said, catching himself before he said something stupid. "Let's go, and take it slow. They're probably pissed after getting blitzed like this." "I'll take the lead," she said, leaping down off the roof, and Naruto followed, determined to watch her back. #####. House, door, entryway, kitchen, dining room, back porch, clear. Repeat. Sakura's mind had been like this for a couple weeks, mechanical and straightforward. She'd embraced it. In her opinion, she'd always thought too much anyway. What was important right now was the mission, taking peace in her own two hands. But something had changed. Maybe it had been Fu. Seeing her had been a shock. Another Jinchuriki. You're close to so many tailed beasts, the necessary tools of peace. And that was true. The tailed beasts were the ultimate violence, and it was useful knowing so many of their hosts. Fu, Kushina, even Gaara, if he was still alive. But Fu was such a bubble of light that Sakura couldn't help but feel guilty thinking of her in such a utilitarian way. Maybe that guilt was what had broken her machine mind, at least for now. Fu and the beast she held, Kome. They were cooperating. Did that mean the Kyuubi, Kurama, could do the same with Kushina? A person and a tailed beast working together were probably stronger than just one or the other. That was how cooperation went. Maybe that would be an even better deterrent than massing the tailed beasts. She felt a hand on her shoulder, and stopped. Everything in her stopped. Naruto was touching her, the feelings that inspired couldn't be neatly categorized. When she'd seen that knife go into his shoulder, she'd wanted to burn down the world. Any world that let him get hurt wasn't the right kind. She could not lose anyone else. If she did, it would be her fault. All your fault, because you were too weak. Strength is everything, peace is the quiet created by destruction. She looked back at him and his earnest blue eyes, feeling words behind her lips but not sure what they would be if she ended up spitting them out. He looked concerned. "I heard something in the next room," he whispered, and all at once she understood they were in another building surrounded by handsome wooden paneling and fine furniture. A home, and an expensive one. She'd heard it too. She just hadn't consciously registered it. She knew because chakra was circulating throughout her body, and her steps were silent. She had already been ready to respond. Sakura nodded, eyeing the door, and she and Naruto took up positions on either side of it. She reached out, feeling the handle, and slowly turned it. Someone burst through, and once more Sakura reacted before she consciously registered it. It was a young man, a cloud ninja with their headband wrapped around their arm and a desperate look in his eyes. He was holding a fizzling explosive tag, and Naruto let out a curse as he realized the danger. "But you're a great ninja now, aren't you?" She was already acting. Her flowing hail blade flickered out, cutting the tag in half and destroying it before it could detonate. The cloud ninja started a hand sign, but Sakura didn't care to find out what jutsu it would be. Her other hand lashed out, and the man fell, cut from hip to shoulder as blood gushed out across the hardwood. She heard a scuffle in the room beyond, and once more her body moved before her mind did. She whirled through the door, spinning and preparing to unleash a volley of slashes that would shred anything in the room. She'd made this jutsu for fighting Jinchuriki, normal ninja stood no chance. There hadn't been someone she couldn't cut down with her bare hands yet, not since she'd had her epiphany after waves. Even Haku. "Sakura." Naruto caught her arm, and Sakura froze. Her blade was thrown off, cutting clean through the ceiling and bisecting the room above. For a second, she had the insane urge to whirl on him, to unleash the Hyaurius Wiccan on him for getting in her way. But the urge was so alien, so absurd, that it vanished instantly, and Sakura was left confused, feeling like the world was moving in jerks and starts. "Naruto, what dash?" she demanded, pulling away and looking into the room. She expected there to be an attack coming at any moment. The sound had obviously been a ninja preparing to follow his fellow, and now they were exposed. Instead, she found 3 people cowering against the back wall. A man and a woman and a young girl, all staring at her in abject terror, too fearful to move. Sakura's brain short-circuited, and her body locked down. She stared at them, trying to understand where the enemy ninja must have gone. Was it an illusion? No, and if Naruto hadn't stopped her, she would have torn them all to shreds. Bothering with an illusion or disguise in that case would be pointless, since they'd still be dead. Why were they here? Was this their home? Had she almost just killed this family as they cowered in their home, held hostage by a cloud ninja? "Sorry," Naruto said, taking the door and slowly closing it. "Stay put, all right? It's dangerous out there." The woman nodded, eyes full of horror. Sakura couldn't look away until the door was fully closed and she couldn't see them anymore. "It's okay," Naruto said. He was seeing through her. "They're fine. You didn't touch them." The bubble of reality that Fia had created was expanding. For the first time in weeks, Sakura felt fully in control of her body, her mind racing without redirection. The tailed beasts, Haku's death, her plan to create the ultimate weapon, every long-term consideration she'd made her entire existence since the attack on Konoha melted away. All that was left was regret and fear, relief, and forgiveness. "Naruto, if you hadn't been here." "Don't think about it," Naruto said quietly, leading her away from the door. They stepped over the body of the cloud ninja and out into the street, looking around. Kushiro was getting quieter, the battle was almost over. There's a lot of stuff that coulda happened. But it didn't. Her heart moved her without permission. Sakura threw her arms around him, pressing her body against his and taking a shuddering breath. She felt Naruto stiffen up before his arms came up and wrapped around her as well, the two of them crushing against each other for several long seconds. "Thank you," she whispered to him. She pulled back, not caring how red his face was, and kissed him. It didn't have any thought put into it. There was no calculation, it was just the only way she could possibly express her gratitude, the feelings that had been bubbling beneath her skin for years. She didn't know how to kiss someone and probably wasn't very good at it, but to her delight Naruto didn't freeze up. After a second he kissed her back, and they drew away a moment later, both as red as tomatoes. He stuttered, at a loss for words. They disentangled, and Sakura took a deep breath, feeling alive and whole for the moment. "Sakura, It's okay," she said, feeling flush and somehow enjoying it. "Naruto, I don't know what I'd do without you. I'm sorry I've been so out of it lately. Everything seems so important, every second of every day. Like I'm the only one who can fix this. But if it weren't for you, I'd just be a murderer now. I almost made a horrible mistake, maybe not the first." It felt so beautiful, so freeing to speak so matter-of-factly, that Sakura thought she might get addicted to it. "You saved me from myself. I'll never be able to make that up to you." "You don't." Naruto rubbed the back of his head, obviously embarrassed and probably having some extremely hormonal thoughts. "You don't have to make it up to me. And that wasn't you. You're not. Sakura, you're not a murderer. You never will be. What did you do to Haku, then?" The poisonous in her voice, blacker than midnight, tried to drag her down, but for once Sakura was able to stomp it down. Standing here in the midst of war, luxuriating in Naruto's light and the faint aftershocks of the kiss rippling through her body, she felt both empty and free. She had doubts, but they were the petty doubts of a teenage girl. She had forgotten her mission, her troubles, and her pain. "Thanks, Naruto," she said, and his smile was a second sun. "Let's go, we should meet back up with everyone else. It sounds like things are wrapping up." They moved cautiously down the street, falling in side by side as they looked around for enemies or allies. Naruto's hand bumped hers, but before Sakura could move it away he reached out with more purpose, taking her hand in his. They walked hand in hand, quietly scanning while their hearts beat out of their chests, until they were reunited with the rest. ####. That evening, there was a celebration in the town of Kushiro. While much of the town had suffered, Rain's strategy had worked to keep casualties to a minimum, and the citizens of Frost, for the most part, saw the newly arrived Rain Ninja as liberators. Sakura wasn't there to see it, but she could hear the distant sounds and see the light of the town through the trees. They had departed the town as swiftly as they'd arrived, stealing a substantial amount of Cloud's supplies in the process. The rest had been destroyed. Staying in a liberated town would be inviting a counter-attack, though several Rain Ninja had stayed behind to assassinate any Cloud Ninja that tried to return to salvage the depot. It was easy for her to picture things going the other way, and for the citizens of Kushiro to have fallen into an even deeper despair. But riding high from the thrill of victory in her first kiss, the morbid thoughts were kept at bay. The Rain contingent had a celebration of their own hidden away in the thick mountain woods, feasting on stolen supplies, drinking, laughing, and telling stories. God was with us today, Nono said emphatically, and Sakura felt compelled to nod along. Her, Naruto, Sasuke, Nono, and several other ninja had gathered around an impromptu table on a tree stump, passing around chocolate and discussing the battle. Every once in a while, she and Naruto were sharing awkward glances, and she was sure Sasuke noticed. Thankfully, he wasn't saying anything, but Sakura could picture his infuriating smirk nonetheless. He delivered a great victory, and she gestured at Sakura and her teammates, have returned some great ninja to the fold. They were toasted. On another day, it would have made Sakura uncomfortable, but today it was easy to smile and return it, clinking her canteen against Nono's. They and the other ninja spoke, recounting what they had seen and Rain's successes, and gradually people drifted away and joined other groups, leaving Nono and Team 7 alone. I wish Kabuto could have been here for this, she said quite suddenly, and Sakura saw Naruto's heart drop out of his stomach. She reached for his hand to comfort him on instinct, and Nono observed it with a wry smile. He would have enjoyed seeing you all again. Nono, Naruto said, steadying himself. Sakura could see that touching him had helped, and that realization made her feel more certain and powerful than any amount of chakra could. I never got to apologize to you. Everything happened so fast. It's okay, Nono said quietly, leaning back in the grass. I've accepted it, Naruto. Kabuto's life was his to spend, I can't begrudge him deciding to save you. She sighed. I taught him everything I could about being both a man and a ninja, but there were some lessons he just couldn't learn. He always put others over himself, ever since he was a child. I'm proud of him, and I'm proud of you. Naruto didn't seem to know what to say, but to Sakura's surprise, Sasuke did. We all owe the nation a debt, he said seriously. Suijutsu, Kabuto, Karen. He glanced at Sakura, and she was even more shocked to find herself nodding. Haku. Without them, Cloud would have killed us. Even if Rain made a mistake in attacking Konoha, that doesn't void that debt. It's why we all came here. Not for revenge. Nono said. That's why most of us are here, after all. I certainly am. There's a bit of that, Sasuke admitted. I can't speak for us all, I think we all made the decision for our own reasons, even if some were shared. But things have gotten too complicated to be solved by just revenge. You lost your son, that makes it simpler for you, maybe. He took a sip of water, looking off into the darkness. Sakura wondered if his vision had gotten worse, and just how much he could see at night now. But it's not for me. Suijutsu told me not to die, so that's all I have to worry about for now. Nono stayed with them for a while longer, quietly speaking with Naruto about his medical jutsu and his discovery of his yang release, before the conversation shifted again. 3 people approached, breaking their circle, Konan, Fu, and Jiraiya. Hey. Fu seemed drunk on the atmosphere, smiling so widely her cheeks were threatening to split. You all did awesome. You did too, Fu, Sakura said, getting met with a brilliant grin. I saw you fighting, you've gotten even faster. Ah, thanks. I've been training my butt off since I woke up. She said, looking like she was about to settle in next to them before she remembered she wasn't alone. Oh, sorry. She stepped aside, letting Konan move past her with a small bow. Lady Konan wanted to speak to you guys. Sakura took them all in, noticing Jiraiya's mild expression and Konan's focus. They'd proven themselves again, she thought. Maybe this really would work out. Sakura, Naruto, Sasuke, Konan said, and Sakura almost gasped when she gave them a small bow. Congratulations on your work. You all performed superbly. She singled Sakura out in particular, her gaze intense but not intimidating. I was told you finished off Dode, Sakura. Cloud's commander? She asked. She barely remembered it, everything had gone so fast that somehow the man's death had left almost no impression on her. She couldn't even picture his face. Yes. I had everyone's help though. It's still impressive, Konan said frankly. He'd been stymieing our efforts in Frost for weeks, one of the Raikage's direct subordinates. Even Deidara and I hadn't been able to finish him off on 2 occasions. You've killed one of Cloud's most valuable ninja. Sakura didn't know how to feel about that, and was fundamentally uncomfortable with people being categorized by value, but recognized that this wasn't the time or place to have such doubts. She bowed her head, accepting the recognition. I'm glad I could help, she said. Even if I'm not a member of the nation anymore. She plucked at her hoodie, pinching one of the red clouds. I'm still a ninja of the Akatsuki. Konan gave her a lingering look, one that Sakura couldn't read. It seems so, she eventually said, turning to the rest of them. We'll be moving east tomorrow. Jiraiya's informed us that Kumo is preparing an attack from Hakata, which likely means they'll be assaulting the Hidden Mist directly. We cannot allow them to be knocked out of the war, so we'll do everything we can to assist with their inevitable counter-attack. She straightened up. Phew, you're free for the evening. Awesome. I'll hang out with these guys then. She said, immediately plopping down next to Naruto. Sakura wondered for a second if she should be jealous, but then shook it off. Naruto was still watching her, a faint grin on his face, and for a second she got lost in his look. Sakura, Konan said, knocking her out of her trance. I'd like to speak to you privately. Of course, she said, looking back at everyone to make sure they didn't have anything to say. Naruto gave her a thumbs up, Sasuke nodded, and Fuya was barely paying attention, chattering about how exciting the battle had been. She glanced at Jiraiya, and he shrugged, he wasn't privy to whatever Konan wanted to discuss. Leaving her friends behind, Sakura followed Konan through the woods as the Omekage checked in with different groups of ninja, acting a silent retainer as Konan informed other groups of their plans, consoled the injured, and took stock of their supplies. Konan didn't say a word to her until about 20 minutes into the process, when they stopped between 2 groups. She had just chastised a young ninja, though still older than Sakura, for lighting a fire and potentially giving away their position, putting it out with a wave of her hands. Sakura, she said, taking a seat on a pile of stones and gesturing for Sakura to do the same. I truly can't believe that you're here. Because of what Yahiko did? She asked, and Konan mutely nodded. I can understand that. But I already told you why I came. And I believe you, Konan said, leaning forward and cupping her chin in her palm. I'll be frank with you, the war has gone well, but I have lost hope. She sighed, looking tired for the first time Sakura had ever seen. The dream of the Akatsuki is in a shallow grave, Yahiko ensured that. He's being held prisoner back in a Megakure, but Nagato cannot be fully rid of him, and neither can I. Sakura sat there, an uncomfortable feeling worming its way through her body. The shadows here seemed deeper, Konan's eyes devoid of light. She is just as lost as you. What would you do, she asked, if Naruto betrayed you? He wouldn't, was Sakura's knee-jerk reaction, but Konan didn't stir at it. But, that's not helpful, is it? No. Are you really asking me? Is there no one else? You've proven yourself insightful, Konan said, and Sakura realized just how hopeless the Omekage's voice was. Here, alone, she had revealed herself to her, and sympathy for the woman bubbled up like a warm spring inside her. Konan had been the one to take her to reign, Konan had been the one to recognize her potential. And now here she was alone and betrayed, leading a war host for a cause that she believed already doomed, fighting the most dangerous nation in the world to try and avenge 100,000 deaths. I don't know what I'd do, she said, the question making her feel sicker the more she considered it. But I had to. She choked, and Konan gave her a worried look. Haku, Sakura grunted, her eyes burning. The lightness she'd felt at Naruto's side seemed like a distant, half-remembered dream. Konan's eyes widened in understanding, and her head fell. "I'm sorry," she said, her fists clenching in her lap. "That's horrific." "Yeah." The darkness swallowed up the word, but Sakura struggled to push forward. "But I kept going. I'm here. If that could happen, even if Yahiko stabbed you in the back, you can keep going too, Konan." She stood up, driven by her inner flame. "Cloud can't get away with this, and that's what you're here for. The Akatsuki isn't dead, and even if it was, it could be reborn. So long as people want an end to war, the Akatsuki can still exist. You would make it real." She took a deep breath of mountain air, so cold it hurt her lungs. "The Yondaime always told us that a shinobi is one who sacrifices. Jiraiya said it's one that endures. Naruto thinks it's someone who protects people. They're all right. You know that. I won't let the hidden leaf destroy the nation of rain, it's too important to the world. No matter what I have to sacrifice or endure to protect it, I won't stop, and neither should you." Konan looked up at her, and while Sakura had hoped her words would inspire the Omekage, she was surprised to see Konan's sorrowful expression. "You shouldn't say that," she said, and Sakura rocked back. "You've already endured too much, Sakura." "That makes me the best choice," Sakura argued, suddenly feeling the gap in age and experience between them. Konan stood up. "She doesn't understand you. What would you sacrifice for peace, Sakura?" she asked, not as a demand but as a plea. "Your parents? Your honor? Your friends? Your village? If it would prevent another war, absolutely," Sakura shot back. "Something needs to be created to keep this from ever happening again, the world just can't keep having these wars." Haku said the very same thing, back when I first met him, that every shinobi war was getting more and more destructive. He even knew that Frost would be where the next war was fought. She gestured around them, feeling her furnace stoke. "Your own life," Konan said, looking heartbroken, and Sakura gave her a determined nod. "If I had to fall on my sword to prevent another war, I'd do it without hesitation. After everything I've seen, everything I've done, I can't picture it any other way," she said, and Konan sighed, wiping her hand across her face. "What about Naruto?" she said quietly, and Sakura froze. "What? Would you sacrifice Naruto?" Konan said clearly. "If you had to make your ideals real, if that was the only way, if Naruto had to die." She couldn't move forward, she had stopped as if inertia didn't exist. "That's what it's like for me," Konan eventually said, when Sakura hadn't spoken for about 10 seconds. "Yahiko was everything to me, I built the Akatsuki with him and Nagato. I thought we had built it for each other." She started moving again. "But now, if we want to move forward, I'll probably have to be rid of him. Think about that, Sakura, before you continue down this path." She was mute. "We'll welcome your help here in Frost. But I think you should go home when we're done, Sakura." Konan looked back with so much sympathy that it hurt. "You should go back to Konoha, and try to not ever sacrifice anything in your life ever again. Even if that means giving up on being a ninja, it would be better than the alternative." She departed without another word, and Sakura was left confused and hurt and alone. She doesn't understand what needs to be done. She's not as strong as you. Has she even had to kill anyone important to her? She just couldn't endure what you could. It was true, Sakura thought. She couldn't say why, but Konan had disappointed her. She should have been stronger, she should have seen that getting rid of Yahiko and Naruto weren't the same thing at all. Naruto would never betray her like Yahiko had them, like Haku had, so there was no point in thinking about it. She was on the right path, she just had to keep moving forward until she had the ultimate weapon that could protect him. Sakura silently slipped into the darkness of the night. ####. When Sakura had been gone for about 10 minutes, Suzuki decided it was time to take a walk. "Oh, that sounds awesome," Fu decided, leaping to her feet with so much energy that it made him feel like an old man. I love taking walks. He looked down at Naruto, bemused at how out of it his friend was. Coming. Yeah, sure, Naruto said, pushing himself to his feet. Jiraiya. I've got some stuff to catch up on, Jiraiya said, which was so comically vague that Sasuke couldn't help but wonder if he was lying. Go on ahead, I'll find you tomorrow. They set off into the night with no particular destination in mind, enjoying the soft crunch of grass and stones under their feet and navigating a dry creek. The night was cool, the murmur of other rain ninja everywhere, and Sasuke found that walking through the dark brought him a measure of peace. It was kind of fun to fight with you guys, Fu said. I didn't really get a chance in Waterfall, so it was really cool. Same, Naruto agreed. Thanks for flying us in. That was awesome. We can fly more if you want, Fu said with a mischievous grin. No one here to tell me not to. We should keep to the ground for now, Sasuke noted. There probably are cloud ninja out and about. They won't take Kushiro's liberation lying down. Yeah, okay, Fu said, sulking. Komei's been talking more to me, by the way. Really? Sasuke asked, wondering if he was going through the motions or actually curious. He was exhausted, it had taken hours for both his arms to be freed from the rubber, and he'd barely been able to breathe the whole time. It wasn't the worst day he'd had, not by a long shot, but it had definitely been uncomfortable. What about you guys? Fu said, and Sasuke almost missed a step. She thinks you're cool. I told her what happened with Aim and Konoha and everything and she says you're exceptional humans. Well, tell her thanks for us, Naruto said, filling in for Sasuke, who wasn't quite sure how to respond to being called an exceptional human. It wasn't a familiar label. I will, Fu promised, and they chattered about meaningless things for a while longer before Sasuke asked what had been lingering on his mind. Is Sakura okay, Naruto? He said, and felt a spike of mean amusement when Naruto blushed. You two kept looking at each other. She's okay, Naruto declared. Something bad almost happened after she killed Dode, but it turned out alright. What do you mean? Sasuke asked, Fu looking back and forth between them like a curious child. Naruto sighed. There was a family, hiding in one of the houses. A cloud ninja had taken them hostage, I think. But he panicked and ran for it. Sakura took him down, no problem, but... He hesitated. She almost went after them all too. I think she would have, if I hadn't been there. I had to grab her. Sasuke came to a stop, looking back. Fu looked a little perturbed as well. She didn't realize they weren't ninja. I guess, Naruto said, shuffling his feet. I'm not sure how though. They weren't letting off any chakra, just hiding there. I realized what was going on right away, but she didn't seem to. It was like she was just moving automatically. But that seemed to snap her out of it. After that, she seemed a lot better. The blush was back, and brighter than ever. Did something else happen? Sasuke asked, feeling an impish urge to push, and Naruto's eyes went wide. He was basically a picture book, even without the Sharingan. What had happened with Sakura was concerning, but it hadn't happened, so Sasuke did his best to put it out of mind and focus on what was in front of him for now. And no, Naruto muttered, averting his eyes. Huh. Fu said innocently. That makes it sound like something totally happened, though. A little, Sasuke said with a mean grin. You sure, Naruto? I mean. Naruto said, a little grin of his own slipping out. Maybe, we might have kissed a little. Whoa. Fu exclaimed. Sasuke couldn't help but let a chuckle slip. You guys kissed. Who started it? She did. Naruto admitted, looking equally embarrassed and relieved, like he couldn't have believed it until he told someone. I was surprised, but it was nice. I want to do it again. You should probably tell her that, not us, Sasuke said wryly, and Naruto stuck out his tongue at him. Shut up. You don't think it's weird, though? He asked, and Sasuke shrugged. You said that you loved her, right? All the way back before waves, he said, and Naruto nodded hesitantly. Fu's eyes were as wide as dinner plates. So if she kissed you, maybe she feels the same way. That's good, right? I guess. Yes? I don't know. Naruto sat down. It's confusing. I'm worried that it'll mess things up, so I haven't talked to her about it. Naruto, you guys love each other? That's so cool. Fu said, once again bringing a grin to Sasuke's face. I knew she liked you, it was obvious, but you must have brought her out of her funk. It was obvious? Wait, her funk? Naruto asked, and Fu nodded enthusiastically. You know what I'm talking about. She was all moody and quiet when you showed up yesterday. But you said she was better afterwards, I bet you pulled her out of it. She clapped her hands on Naruto's shoulders, staring earnestly at him. You should stick by her, she needs your help. Did she tell you anything like that? Something like that, yeah, Naruto said quietly, and Fu kept nodding so vigorously that Sasuke thought her head might wobble off. It's not that she's weak or anything, it's just that what you all are going through is hard, she said brightly. But I've heard that love is, like, all you need for that. I mean, I've never loved anyone, I think, but that's how it goes in all the stories. You should go find her. I bet she's bummed out with just Konan for company, she probably misses you. Naruto looked shocked at the concept, and glanced over at Sasuke, who sighed. She's right, he said. You don't have to tell her everything, not right now. But Sakura needs you, more than she does anyone else. If you love her, you should be there for her. Naruto blinked, and came to his decision as visibly as a light switch flipping on. Okay. I'll see you both later. He ran off leaving them in the dark, and Sasuke laughed. Fu looked over at him mischievously. Has it been a while? She said, and Sasuke shook his head, glad to find a grin that wasn't fading like a fuelless fire. It's been a while, he confirmed, and Fu laughed. That's so cool, she said, looking off towards where Naruto had run. It really seemed to make him happy. Do you want a kiss? Sasuke blinked, remembering the kind of life Fu had lived, and smiled. No, thanks. I've got a girlfriend. He wondered how Hinata was doing. She'd been recovering well when he'd left, but he'd gotten the sense she was disappointed not to be going with him. He couldn't blame her. It might have been terrifying, but the feeling of side by side with her during the invasion had been like nothing else in his life. If she'd been here, maybe he wouldn't have been surprised by Dode. Ah, makes sense, Fu said, not sounding disappointed. She pondered for a second, looking down. Should I get a boyfriend? If you think it would make you happy, Sasuke said with a shrug. But considering how things have gone, I wouldn't worry about that right now. You should probably make more friends before you decide whether you like any of them that way. You give really good advice, Sasuke, Fu said thoughtfully. I don't know. I never thought about it until just now, to be honest. I guess I'll think more about it, even if it's kinda gross dash. She paused, suddenly cocking her head. Sasuke did the same, following her instinct. The woods were quiet but for distant murmurs and the occasional scuttle of wildlife, a soft breeze ruffling the trees. But he suddenly felt the same way Fu did. Even if there was no sign, no sound, not even any feeling of chakra, they both felt like they were being watched. They silently shifted, putting themselves back to back and rotating, scanning the forest. Please don't shout. The voice came from directly above them, a conversational whisper that only they could hear drifting down from a tree branch. It would be pretty problematic. Sasuke and Fu slowly looked up, and found Itachi Uchiha staring down at them. Sasuke reached up and grabbed Fu's shoulder. The girl had frozen solid, whether from fear or hatred he couldn't immediately tell. Wait, he whispered, and thankfully she nodded. If Itachi was there to hurt him, Sasuke knew he was fast enough to do it before they could raise the alarm. But Sasuke didn't think that was why he was there. He hadn't seen the summoned crow all day, it must have led his brother to him. Itachi, he said, keeping his voice a whisper. You should leave. Yeah, sorry. I was trying to wait until you were alone, but I got impatient, Itachi said, perched in the tree like a giant black bird. Phew, do you mind if I speak with my brother alone? No. Phew said, matching their volume. That's definitely not happening. Itaka sighed. Fine. Well, let me start off by apologizing to you. I'm very sorry for the kidnapping and brainwashing. And the murders. Thanks, I guess. Phew clearly had no idea what to do, and Suzuki barely did either. But I still hate you. Understandable, Itaka noted. Anyway, Suzuki, congratulations on getting a girlfriend, that's great. You didn't come here to say that, Suzuki said flatly, and Itaka smiled. True. I'm just here to let you know you can call it off. What I told you last time, I mean. Ah, so Itaka was still insane then. Suzuki didn't know why he was disappointed. It belatedly occurred to him that if his brother was here, Madara's will was as well. In the darkness, it was impossible to see Itaka's shadow. Black Zetsu was probably lingering on both him and Phew, ready to trip or strangle them if things went the wrong way. They weren't the only participants in the conversation. But maybe he could turn that to his advantage. Suzuki decided to go for the decisive blow. Itaka, I learned more about that. I think I can help you. Itaka raised an eyebrow. Really? What do you mean exactly? What you described, what's happened in the past, I talked to someone that helped it all make sense, Suzuki said, trying not to let his voice falter. Would Black Zetsu attack if it was revealed? Could they fight a living shadow? Madara had said only the Rinnegan could destroy it, and the Rinnegan was far away. It didn't matter, Itaka had to know the truth. Madara Uchiha. You spoke with Madara? Itaka said, genuinely surprised. How? He had been brought back by the Edo Tensei technique, Suzuki said, not surprised to see that Itaka clearly knew of it. By Orochimaru, in the Nation of Rain. He told Mother and Obito and I about his plans, about what he'd done after the first Hokage defeated him. He wasn't killed, he lingered for decades, trying to make things go his way. And before he died, his shadow came alive and left him. He said it was his will, it acted on its own, trying to guide people to undertake his plans for him. His hands curled into fists. Itaka, the way he talked, we're certain that his will went to you. That it helped you kill Father and Shisui and the rest. You're not crazy, you have some of Madara's chakra attached to you. Itaka didn't speak for nearly a minute, and Suzuki and Phew waited with bated breath for him to act. That doesn't make sense, Itaka finally said. I would have noticed something like that. It does. Your shadows helped you before, even, Suzuki said, a bit of desperation leaking into his voice. Remember? It tripped Obito that night. It held me down in the forest of death, and when you kidnapped Phew. You don't know any Narajutsu, do you? Did you even notice that had happened, back then? We think it must be able to alter your perception, at least a little. You weren't aware for a whole year, weren't you? Itaka was silent once more, staring down at them with a Sharingan that seemed painted on. You said your eyes recovered during that year, Suzuki said, just now realizing the connection. If anyone would know how to cause that, it would be Madara Uchiha. His shadow knew everything he did, he called it Black Zetsu. Itaka started to speak, and then stopped. Phew was fidgeting, obviously fighting the urge to fight or flee. It was anathema to any ninja to just stand there with a potential enemy right above them. If that is what happened, Itaka eventually decided, then Black Zetsu is gone. I came here to tell you I'm cured, Suzuki. He leaned back on the tree, shifting into a more relaxed position. I couldn't tell until it happened, but my head is clear. My mind is my own. It's like a curtain got pulled back, everything is much clearer than it's ever been. That, Suzuki decided, was exactly what someone who had been possessed by Black Zetsu would say. The thought came like a bolt of lightning, that was why Itaka had come here. The shadow had realized Suzuki was onto it, and had directed Itaka to try and dissuade him. Maybe Black Zetsu was still connected to Madara in some way, and had understood that someone had caught onto it somehow. Suzuki couldn't claim to understand how living shadows perceived the world, or what they could or could not be capable of. But right now, what mattered is that he wasn't talking to Itaka, he was talking to Black Zetsu, and he had no idea how to rip him off Itaka's soul. "That's great," he said. "But you can understand if I don't believe you right away." "I'd be disappointed if you did," Itaka said with a small laugh that perfectly mimicked his true laugh. "But I know I put a burden on you, and I didn't want you carrying it without cause. Maybe Madara's will understood I had noticed it, and so fled. Shadows abhor the light, right? We'll have to track it down once this is over. It sounds dangerous." "Makes perfect sense," Sasuke said. "So, is that it?" "I'm here to help with the war," Itaka said, and Sasuke grunted. "You can tell Konan that, though obviously I'm going to stay out of her way. Our last conversation made it clear she doesn't enjoy my company." "I thought you hated war, Itaka," Sasuke said, and Itaka shrugged. "I do. But there are good wars and bad wars, and defending Frost from Cloud's insanity is a good war, as far as I see it. Maybe we'll see each other around." That was rich coming from him, but Sasuke let it go without comment. "Stay safe, then," he said instead. "Thanks for letting me know." "Anytime." "Love you, Sasuke," Itaka said, and then he was gone like smoke in the wind. Fia finally let out the breath she'd been holding. "What the fuck?" she muttered, the fuck much louder than the rest of her words, and Sasuke started nervously giggling. "Sorry. He's insane," he said, wondering why he felt the need to apologize on Itaka's behalf. "But believe it or not, this is good. He's strong, Cloud's in even more trouble." And more than that, Sasuke thought, they were making progress now. They could free Itaka from Madara's will. Even if he couldn't picture how they would pin down a shadow, there had to be a way. If Itaka thought Black Zetsu was gone, they would have an opportunity. So long as they played it perfectly, he could still save his brother. Obito Sensei Chapter 84. Beyond Frost, Nagato's prisoner. The room he had been confined to was a truly grand space with intricately carved murals covering the walls, thick hand-knotted rugs imported from the land of wind, and an oversized four-poster bed with royal purple drapes and 500,000 ryo mattress. Crystal glasses with fine stoppered liquor decorated the cabinet, and leather-bound books stuffed the shelf at the foot of the bed. It was an opulent suite where everything was catered to taste, power, and wealth, filled with the signs of Reign's success and multiculturalism. Being blind, Yahiko could not appreciate much of it. Even if he could see, he likely would not have anyway. Though the room had a balcony that gazed out onto a megakure, the view had been spoiled by two separate attacks and the half-repaired devastation of the city. Even to a blind man, it served as a constant reminder of his rage. House arrest was the most genial sort of confinement possible. He was not even forbidden to leave the suite, and with Sage Mode, it was trivial to navigate even better than a man with sight could. But everywhere he went, he was shadowed, and right now Yahiko had even less power to affect the nation's course than a genin. At least, officially. No matter what Nagato had said, ninja could not turn away from him. They understood with the sharp clarity that only followers could that Yahiko was responsible for what the nation had grown into, even more so than Nagato and Konan were. Because where would they be without him? It was his vision that had kept them alive before they'd found Jiraiya, it was his drive that had convinced the Sunin to teach them. Without him, Nagato would never have found the confidence to embrace the power of the Rinnegan and use it to change the world. Without him, Konan would never have kept studying her paper jutsu to the point of becoming an S-rank ninja. He had pushed his oldest and only friends higher and harder than anyone else, to the point that even when Hanzo had poisoned him and left his lungs filled with blood they had pushed on and deposed the tyrant without him in that fateful final battle. Now, he had been left behind once more. Last time, for an injury he had sustained, now, for an injury the nation had sustained. He understood what had driven his loved ones to this drastic action, even if it was foolishness. Humans were complicated, but their motivations were often simple. Envy and fear, in Yahiko's experience, were the root of all ambition. People came together out of fear of the other, of the unknown, and then they desired what others had. When they had been children, he had wanted nothing more than the imagined security enjoyed by the larger powers. Now, as an adult, his fear was that that security had never existed, and would have to be created from scratch. So Nagato and Konan envied his decisiveness, and they feared his independence. Going behind their back had not been a mistake, It had kept Konoha entirely in the dark, and while the attack hadn't succeeded entirely, the leaf was nonetheless crippled. Minato had underestimated Nagato, just like everyone except Yahiko ever had, and now Konoha's strength was revealed to be a fragile tower of secrets and lies. Yes, Konoha was the strongest village, so long as the Hokage technique was a secret. So long as its Jinchuriki ki was intact. So long as everyone thought it was the strongest. The fact that Kushina hadn't accompanied Minato to the assault certainly meant that she was dead or disabled. Kimimaro had sacrificed his life to further the revolution. It certainly explained Minato's fury. Yahiko leaned back in his armchair, continuing to fall deeper into thought and ignoring his guest as the ninja stood at attention, waiting on his next words. Nagato had made a mistake not killing Minato at that moment. They'd all known he was capable of it, but he'd chosen to follow Jiraiya's lessons instead of pursuing the final victory. That wasn't a failure, not really. Jiraiya's lessons had brought them all together, and they were soothing to the heart and pleasing to the mind. To extend a hand in forgiveness, or to meet hate with love, those were the beautiful images that could unite nations and forge myths that would endure for millennia. They had granted the sage immortality, and many other martyrs besides. But martyrs were the foundations of legends. They didn't win wars. And right now, Rain was engaged in the final war, the ultimate crucible to test its beliefs and its methods against a cruel existence that wanted it exterminated. For all the country's history it had been this way, bombarded from every side, colonized, exploited, used as a battleground so as not to befoul the wealthy and fortunate parts of the world. With the country capped by the nation's might, that bile had spilled out into the rest of the continent. What had the world given Rain beyond death and destruction? What protest could it offer when they were given back? Nagato had to continue the war, and to finish it. Konan had to continue dealing with Cloud. Those two things were the absolute highest priority. For now, it did not matter if Konoha believed a ceasefire had been reached, so long as Nagato did not believe the same. And for that, Yahiko said out loud, "We will have to be involved. Lord first." The Jonin that was meeting with him was named Azai, a loyal ninja that had defected from the Hidden Sand more than a decade ago. Yahiko did not trust him as much as Nagato and Konan, or the Akatsuki's commanders, but with Ki and Kimimaro dead he was sufficient. "I presume Nagato has continued to steer resources away from the Land of Fire," Yahiko said, and he heard Azai nod. "You're correct, sir. Though he has not declared the Hidden Leaf a neutral party, most of his orders have recalled more rain forces to the nation, in addition to sending our forces in the Land of Frost reinforcements. They have been meeting with great success there. Though." He paused, and Yahiko could feel his trepidation. "There has been some unsettling news." "Don't delay," Yahiko commanded, and Azai obeyed immediately. Even blind, his voice was confidence itself. For someone who desired dominion over the world, nothing less would suffice. "Some of the reinforcements were not ours," Azai admitted. "Sakura Harano, Sasuke Uchiha, and Naruto Namikaze have joined with Konan's forces, accompanied by Jiraiya. They've assisted her in liberating Kushiro, and are now traveling east with the rest to destroy the cloud forces massing at the coast. Some of the crystal in the room cracked, expensive liquor dribbled out and doubtlessly stained the exquisite carpets, and Azai fell silent. Yahiko had not meant to lose control like that, but he couldn't let his subordinate know that. He fell deeper into the expression of power, letting his chakra rage and match his inner storm. The room groaned and shook as the aura of a sage assailed it, before Yahiko reined his chakra in like a hungry beast and leaned forward, focusing his empty sockets on his guest. "That is unfortunate," he said shortly. "No doubt it's a ploy by Konoha to distract Konan, or worse, to try and convince her to be rid of me completely." "I could not believe that Lady Konan could do such a thing," Azai said, and Yahiko nodded. "I do not either, but that doesn't change that Jiraiya and the Leaf would make the attempt." He made a show of consideration, even though he had already made up his mind. "Nagato must be happy with the news." "He is. He sees those ninja as a bridge to peace. The original plan to release them as ambassadors to Konoha is being reconsidered in light of their achievements in Frost. He doesn't understand Jiraiya Sensei's true desires," Yahiko said, his voice low. "Though they may be talented ninja, as they are, they could be a poison to the nation. Do you believe they should be removed? Azai said. Not stiffly, nor eagerly, the matter-of-fact question of a ninja who already knew of the means, and was simply looking for confirmation. No. That would be too obvious, and would drive Nagato and Konan further into pacifism, Yahiko said, leaning back and breathing out. They will have to be worked around. The important thing is that Nagato continues to prosecute the war. My time as his shepherd has passed, he has gained the power and independence to fully act on his own. My role as the first vanguard has been completely superseded. But he still needs your guidance, Azai argued, and Yahiko laughed. He does not need my guidance, he needs to open his eyes to the truth, he said. Once rain reigns, even if it is over ashes, we can dictate the course of history to our desire. To reach that point, anything is acceptable. The tailed beasts are powerful weapons, as is Cloud's cannon, but Nagato outstrips them both. He closed his hand into a fist. The push must be twofold. Firstly, those who advise Nagato must continue to show him that he is essentially a god. If a cult must be fostered, so be it, though genuine fanaticism wouldn't be desirable here. He must act unilaterally. His heart is just as vulnerable to injustice as mine, he must be counseled to listen to it, and to strike out and destroy evil wherever it appears. He has the power, he has the high ration. There is nothing beyond him. Konan and I are now secondary to him. As the other villages have vested their power and trust in a soul cage, so it must be for Nagato. He paused, taking a deep breath. Secondly, the war must continue until the other villages are destroyed, physically and spiritually. There is no chance of Cloud surviving this conflict. Konan, Nagato, Kiri, or Konoha will surely destroy them eventually, together or apart. Suna will attempt to retrieve their Jinchuriki from us, stuck in old ways of thinking and chained to obsolete powers. That will give us the justification to obliterate them. The hidden stone and its fence-sitter will start to tremble at the imbalance and step in, and Nagato will flatten them too. That leaves the problem of Kiri and Konoha. He steepled his fingers as Azai continued to listen, captured by Yahiko's gravity. Kiri will be greatly weakened by the war in Frost, they may even wither away on their own, if things turn dramatically against them or Cloud fires their cannon once more. This leaves our primary struggle with Konoha, as was fated from the beginning. Nagato will be tempted to let them survive, to allow them to grow once more into a competing power, and perhaps that would even be possible given the clans and tailed beasts they have at their disposal. He is strong, but not invincible. So the war could not be allowed to cool. The hidden leaf must not have time to recover. No matter what, the nation must continue to hound them to the point of destruction. That would not be possible with counseling alone. Nagato is unlikely to shift his approach solely based on the words of others, even if he trusts them. Yes. The flame would need to be stoked. Yahiko closed his eyes. If necessary, further destruction could be unleashed on the nation to rekindle them. Azai paused. False attacks. Well within our capabilities. And if Konoha protested, what could they prove? Nagato cannot question the dead, and the leaf has shown time and time again they cannot control their own ninja. In the eyes of the world, such a thing would be eminently believable. I see. Azai considered, and accepted. Is there anything else? No. We will leave it here for now. If you stay longer, Nagato may suspect something. Yahiko rose, heading towards the balcony. Leave, and inform the others. If I have further considerations, I will contact you. Azai left without a word, and Yahiko strode out onto the balcony, sightlessly staring out over the country he and the people who were so close to him they may as well have been his heart and lungs had built. As he did, the first doubt of the day assailed him. You became strong together. By doing this, you have destroyed yourself. Was this how Hanzo had felt, he wondered. Hidden away, living in fear of power beyond his comprehension and working through middlemen and patsies. No, of course not. He dismissed the thought for the ridiculous comparison it was. Hanzo had been a cruel tyrant who killed without a thought to cement his own power. Yahiko was surrendering all the true power he had. The fate of the world was in Nagato's hands now, not his, and he was content with that. He had done everything he could to bring the quiet, shy boy with the power of a god to this point, and now only had to unleash him. Nagato had endured all of the nation's pain as his own. He would teach the rest of the nations and ninja of the world that pain, and in the face of that overwhelming agony they would be cowed into obedience or destroyed. Once Nagato ruled the world, no one would ever have to suffer again. It was a beautiful thought, but it didn't stick in his mind as it should have. It felt hollow, insincere. For a moment, everything did. A harsh breeze blew in from the lake, rattling the balcony's iron bars, and Yahiko shivered, though he wasn't cold. For a split second, he thought he heard his name in the wind. Unless you're saved by a miracle. Jiraiya's piercing dark eyes glared at him from beyond the veil of blindness, and Yahiko stormed back inside, slamming the door and staggering back to his chair. Even if the first vanguard wasn't needed anymore, that didn't mean he had no role to play. He'd meditate. He'd plot. He'd find the way forward. You're going to die alone. Obito Sensei Chapter 85. Must make daring plans, even if they won't survive contact with the enemy. Over the next several days, Rain's forces pushed east across the land of frost with ferocious energy. In the face of such a concentration of powerful ninja, the occupying forces of the land of lightning and Kumigakure had little choice but to shatter. Ninja weren't made to take and hold ground, but there was nonetheless a brutal rout across the country as Cloud Ninja retreated, consolidated, and were descended upon and wiped out one after the other. Many escaped to fight another day, but demoralized and disorganized as they were, they had little chance to affect the eventual outcome of the brief and bloody war. Rain did not come through this offensive unscathed despite their local superiority. Ambushes, traps, brave or stupid Kumo ninja, and bad luck drained their numbers with fatalities and injuries that even medical ninja of Naruto and Nono's caliber could not repair. By the time they reached Hakata, Konan's active forces had been reduced to 53 ninja, less than half of their initial contingent. Other roaming assault and raiding groups were active across the country, but they experienced the same or worse casualty rates as Konan's command company, reducing Omegakure's strength in the Land of Frost to roughly 350 ninja. These casualties were far past what most shinobi villages would consider having rendered a force combat ineffective, especially in the face of Cloud's superior numbers and equipment, but Konan and her subordinates stubbornly pushed on nonetheless. None of Rain's S-rank ninja had fallen. Until one did, destroying Cloud's strength took priority. Team 7 fought 7 battles in 2 days, all as fierce and dangerous as their first assault on Kushiro. They saved lives and also ended them, and 2 of them considered that deeply while the last thought little at all. Ninja moved quickly when it came to everything from war to socializing, and by the end of their 3rd day in the Land of Frost, Team 7 were completely enmeshed in the Rain Force and trusted as battle comrades, if not absolutely. In that respect, Naruto and Sakura's plan had been a complete success. On the night of their 2nd day, shortly after speaking with his brother, Sasuke passed on Itaka's message to Konan, who was disturbed by it but had very little power to challenge it. On the evening of the 3rd day, Sasuke called together the people present that he trusted most, Naruto, Sasuke, Jiraiya, Fu, and Konan. Shadowed by the blood-red sunset, he united his knowledge with Jiraiya, the only other there that had spoken with Madara Uchiha, and explained to all of them his suspicions about Itachi, his concerns about the living shadow known as Black Zetsu, and the beginning of his plan to deal with it. No one there could have known that this conference, undertaken with utmost secrecy and painful sincerity, was shadowed by an unwelcome eavesdropper. ####. Normally, I would have to agree with your brother, Konan said, crossing her arms. Sasuke knew she'd humored him by agreeing to this reclusive meeting, and that he didn't deserve more of her attention than any other ninja in the war band. That's what they had become, racing across the country and attacking any enemies that tried to resist them as they made their way towards the port city of Hakata. It sounds absurd. But, Naruto asked. He and Fu had worn almost the same expression throughout the conversation, something between faint astonishment and paranoia. Jiraiya and Sakura had been eerily similar as well, quietly contemplating the impossibilities they were being told with hardly a word in edgewise. But this sounds unfortunately familiar, Konan admitted. They were some distance from the rest of the Rain Ninja, and she was keeping her voice low. Nagato had terrible nightmares when we were younger. He often believed something was chasing after him. When he grew older, the nightmares disappeared, and so we believed them the immature fears of a child in the midst of war. She grimaced. But when your brother appeared in a megacooler after it was attacked, Sasuke, while he was fighting Nagato to kidnap you, I thought it must have been some sort of secret technique. His shadow came to life. It screamed and drove Nagato back. It was only thanks to that he escaped. It came out when I was fighting Nagato, it screamed. Sasuke nodded, stopping a tremor of fear or excitement from rippling down his arm before it could start. He told me exactly that, he confirmed. I think that was the final straw for him. Black Zetsu must have been desperate to escape. Madara said that the Rinnegan was the only thing that could kill him. If that's the case, risking revealing himself would have been worth it. Do you believe that? Jiraiya asked. Sasuke shrugged. Cause pushing Itachi and Nagato together again probably won't be possible. Especially if Madara's will is focused on surviving. I think Madara was full of shit, Sasuke said frankly, and Jiraiya chuckled and nodded. He might have thought that the Rinnegan was all that could destroy his will, but I doubt that's true. From what he described, it's a shadow animated by chakra, like a shadow clone. Hitting it hard enough would hurt it, if that's the case, and even if it's somehow immune to physical damage, attacking its chakra directly would certainly damage it. Can you do that, Sasuke? Sakura asked, her tone intense, and Sasuke shook his head. Maybe eventually, but not right now. Even my Mangekyo couldn't. Konan stirred, his eye's evolution was new information to her, but Sasuke didn't care. She wasn't his enemy, and if things went right hopefully never would be. But that doesn't matter. There's plenty of people who can. My mother has a technique for it, and Hinata's gentle fist can drain chakra. Either of them could probably attack Black Zetsu directly and kill it. Then, Itachi would be free. That's good. And it's not like it would leave Itachi, considering how dangerous he is, Sakura mused, and Sasuke nodded along. Him coming here practically proves it. If he was thinking clearly, I doubt he would have risked everything approaching you like he did. It's way too creepy though, Fu said. Naruto nodded along, looking more and more disturbed as everything sank in. Being possessed by an old dead crazy guy? Or, well, his shadow anyway? It's no wonder your brother is so weird, Sasuke. She considered her words for a moment. No offense. None taken, Sasuke assured her. It was his lifeline right now, so he didn't mind Fu throwing it towards him. It was easy for him to believe that everything strange and wrong about Itachi was due to Madara's shadow. It was the simplest, the most correct explanation. No matter what Madara had said, there was no way his brother could have murdered all the people he had without Black Zetsu pushing him forward. I didn't know chakra could do that sort of thing, Naruto admitted. But I guess. What? Sasuke asked, seeing his friend struggle for the words. After a moment, Naruto decided to take the plunge, looking around to see everyone's reaction. It's kinda like the Baijuya, isn't it? He said, and everyone stirred. Sasuke hadn't considered that angle, and he paid close attention as Naruto continued. Life created from chakra. Which is also sorta what my own technique is, but only halfway. Naruto sat down, cupping his chin in his hands. Chakra is capable of all sorts of insane things. I guess no one really understands all of it. Except maybe Nagato, with those eyes, but I feel like if he knew how to make his shadow come to life he would do it. He looked to Konan for confirmation, but she just shrugged. I don't know. I'm not sure where I'm going with this. It just stuck out to me, that's all. It's a good point, Naruto, Jiraiya said, sitting down as well. As if by a shared gravity, most of the shinobi were brought to the ground except for Fu, who kept anxiously shifting from foot to foot. There may be another factor we're missing. The sage had sons, after all, but Kushina said the Kyuubi, Kurama, told her they were made in his image. It might be that Asura and Indra were the sage's shadow given life and a bit more form than Madara's. Maybe the old bastard was doing his best to have a kid despite missing his chance. Gross, Naruto said, sticking his tongue out. Sasuke didn't miss the brief glance, and blush, directed at Sakura, though it seemed like she had. Sakura was absorbed in her own thoughts, staring off into the middle distance. But I guess that kinda makes sense. What does dash? He looked at Fu and then paused, obviously realizing that Fu hadn't shared her relationship with Komei with Jiraiya and Konan. Fu looked back cluelessly before her eyes went wide and she stuttered. Oh, well, I guess. She said, and then paused, doubtlessly listening to an inner voice. Sasuke almost face-palmed at how obvious it was. Jiraiya and Konan were both staring at her with evident curiosity. I don't know anything about that. I know where kids come from, obviously. I think. Is that, when it comes to a guy like the Sage of Six Paths she grew more and more flustered under the attention. Anyway, I wouldn't have anything to say about that. I don't know, I guess, there's nothing extra that I do know dash. Thanks Fu, Sasuke said, cutting off the most embarrassing attempt at lying that he'd ever seen. She gave him a look that was equally sweaty and relieved. We get it. I'm gonna go climb a tree, she abruptly announced, and immediately did just that, retreating from the conversation. Konan watched her go with a confused and pitying look. Waterfall did a terrible job of socializing her, she eventually decided, and Sasuke couldn't help but nod in agreement. Not that your brother helped, I imagine. On that, Sasuke said, there's one extra problem, I think. Oh good, Konan said dryly. I was worried there were too few. Itaki returned a Sharingan he'd stolen to Obito Sensei right before Cloud's attack, Sasuke said, ignoring the Amekage's sarcasm. Everyone perked up, and he continued. It was the eye of Shisui Uchiha, Sensei's brother. It was a Mangekyo as well, and contained a powerful genjutsu. I never got all the details about it from the clan, but it was called the Koda Amatsukami. Apparently it was unbelievably strong and undetectable, long-lasting hypnosis meant to permanently alter people's behavior. No doubt what Itaki intended to use on Nagato in their personal meeting, then, Konan noted. But he returned it before he got the chance. Obito told me he said it had been used up, Sasuke said, paraphrasing a strange and terrifying conversation. Meaning he used it a bunch. We figured it was how he pulled off the attack on Waterfall, but it made me worry about Black Zetsu again. Itaka told me he didn't mean to kill Shisui, that it just happened, and he took his eye on instinct. I think Black Zetsu was the one that wanted the Koda Amatsukami, not Itake, and with him not remembering a whole year, plus Fu being held captive by him all that time. You think Fu's been hypnotized? Sakura asked, and Sasuke nodded. She was hypnotized. She and that other Jinchuriki from Cloud, plus who knows how many others. Even if she seems fine now, there might be some sort of delayed command implanted in her. He held his hands up helplessly. I doubt there's anything we can do about it. It's just something to keep in mind. Itaka would have been stupid to not put a command on her to protect him, for example. Just little things we need to keep an eye out for. Konan sighed. Nagato examined both Fu and Ujito Nii, she said. Searching for exactly such things. But he didn't find anything. Either your brother didn't make those safeguards, or this genjutsu was beyond the Rinnegan's perception. Neither are comforting. But after a moment, she waved them off. But there's nothing to do about it now. It's just another threat we must consider. Is Ujito still alive? Sakura asked, and Konan nodded. Alive and imprisoned. Initially, she was seen as a negotiating chip with Cloud. Now. I'm not sure, to be honest, she admitted. She's achieved mastery of her beast, like Fu and Gaara. In that sense, killing her would be a shame. But I doubt she could be turned against Kumigakure. Nagato hasn't changed his mind. Maybe he's waiting to see how the war goes before he does. They all sat on that for a moment. Sasuke wondered if Cloud's Jinchuriki had the same kind of relationship with their beast that Fu had managed with Komei. Were tailed beasts cooperating with their hosts more common than any of them could have known, or had the woman really managed to dominate the Baijiryu on her own? Was there anything else, Sasuke? Konan eventually asked, breaking the fugue. He shook his head. No, he said, and when Konan rose everyone followed after her. I thank you for sharing this, she said, maybe slightly too formally. It doesn't seem like I'll be much assistance with your brother, Sasuke. To be truthful with you, if I see him again, I will kill him. She smiled sourly. But if he really was manipulated by forces beyond his control, I wish you the best of luck in freeing him. No one deserves that fate. Thank you, Konan, Sasuke said with a brief bow, and though there were some lingering conversations from there the conference split. Naruto retrieved Fu, Jiraiya departed with Konan to speak with her further, and Sasuke and Sakura were left by themselves for a time. Don't worry, Sasuke, she told him, and he gave her a grateful smile. There were times when Sakura's eyes burned with certainty that made him feel like anything was possible, and this was one of them. We'll get that shadow. I guarantee it. ####. They arrived at the outskirts of Hakata the next day, and Sasuke was sent on an unusual scouting mission. By now, Hyuga was well aware of Rain's air superiority, but there still wasn't much they could do about it. Anti-air ninjutsu were rare, techniques that allowed flight rarer, and so for now Megaku's forces still held mastery of the skies. Because of that, Sasuke had been unsure of whether Konan would immediately order an attack on the city and the military forces that were massing inside it, but once again the Omekage had prioritized Frost's civilian population and trade infrastructure over a more decisive military action. That was why on the clear-skied morning of May 3 Sasuke was 1,000 feet in the air, being hoisted by Fu once more as they circled the city center of Hakata. With his Sharingan active, Sasuke scanned the city from above, taking every detail in and committing everything to memory. It wasn't a strategy he would have thought of himself, he just didn't take air power for granted the way Konan did. But being utilized like some sort of futuristic spying, flying camera appealed to him in an amusing way. This was something only an Uchiha could do, even if Hinata could have done it much better. Hakata was a massive city, easily the size of a Megakur and the main port for the eastern side of the Land of Frost. Suburbs sprawled around it into the heavily forested mountains for miles, and tremendously expensive beachfront mansions and resorts dotted the shore where industrial and commercial docks didn't pierce out into the water. It had dozens of buildings that were multiple stories, some towering to 100 feet and beyond, a flourishing commercial center that was untouched by war. It reminded Sasuke of Fukushima City to an uncomfortable degree. He hoped, so much that it burned, that Hakata wouldn't meet the same fate. Still good, Sasuke? Fu asked cheerfully, and he gave her a thumbs up, not shifting his focus from the city below. Konan had charged him with picking out every possible garrison and defensive center in the city, and while he was doing that, it wasn't the main thing that was taking up much of his attention. He was far more focused on the harbor, and the frenzied activity taking place there. Dozens of ships, large ones, had been massed in the artificial bay constructed on the city's southeastern side. They ran a full gamut of type and use, cruise ships with colorful flags, iron military vessels with mounted cannons, private yachts of gaudy colors, massive fishing barges covered in netting, and far more beyond. However, all of them were swarming with shinobi and government soldiers making preparations, storing weapons and supplies and removing unnecessary equipment. From what Sasuke was seeing, Cloud was planning a naval assault. More than that, they were planning an obvious naval assault, making little to no effort to conceal their preparations. Such a thing was practically unheard of in the history of shinobi warfare. They had obviously press-ganged dozens of ships, 58 by his count, and were transforming the civilian ones into ad hoc carriers. He couldn't understand it. Fighting the hidden mist in their preferred environment was obviously stupid, doing it with a ramshackle fleet was insane. Konan had speculated Hakata was the base for an attack intended to knock Kirigakure out of the war, but was this really Cloud's plan? No, he decided, tapping Fu and signaling her to head west. It probably wasn't a feint, considering how much effort was being put in, but there were factors he was missing here. Cloud must have had other weapons like the cannon or specialized jutsu that made this assault feasible. Just because they hadn't been deployed in Frost already, did not mean they didn't exist. Cloud's ninja weren't stupid, and they didn't throw their lives away without purpose. Most likely, the colorful fleet really was a threat to Kirigakure, and Konan had to be notified right away. Did they see us? She asked, noticing his urgency. Yeah, Sasuke confirmed. While he'd been memorizing the fleet, he'd noticed ninja mobilizing from the rooftops. 2 full squads, moving quickly and heading towards them across the city, though he'd quickly lost them when they dipped down to street level. Most likely a sensor jutsu. There's at least 6 of them, and more will probably be coming. Cloud had to know that taking out a Megakuru's flyers was critical. He wouldn't be surprised if 20 ninja were sent after them, considering how many were in Hakata right now. Well, we can't lead them back to everyone, Fu said, pouting as they buzzed west away from the rising sun. Should we land and fight M? Do you think you can take that many? Sasuke asked, and Fu gave an enthusiastic nod. Probably. Besides, it's not like we have much of a choice, she said. We don't have to kill them, after all. Just gotta make sure they can't follow us, right? She was right. Fu was fast when she was flying, but not so fast they'd be able to completely outplace ninja pursuing them along the ground. And Sasuke didn't like the idea of the rain contingent getting counterattacked as they lurked on Hakata's outskirts. Cloud so completely outnumbered them now that even if they had ninja like Konan, Jiraiya, and Deidara, the main force would probably still be wiped out. All right, he said, directing her down. Past that neighborhood, then. Let's draw them as far into the forest as possible. Fu landed fast and hard, and she and Sasuke scrambled into cover in short order, concealing themselves as they waited for their pursuers to arrive. It wasn't a perfect ambush, but it was the best they could manage on short notice, and Sasuke was confident they were equipped enough to escape the Kumo ninja if worse came to worst. They lurked in the trees for 30 seconds, prepared to make contact at any moment. Nothing came. They waited for another 30 seconds, sure that the Cloud Ninja were creeping up on them, silently approaching their position with aid from their sensor jutsu. Sasuke began to consider if they had made a tactical error. Maybe it had been arrogant of them to stand and fight, maybe they should have just run until they'd lost them completely before returning to Sakura, Naruto, and the rest. They'd grown used to trying to pick off enemy ninja piecemeal, and now their bad habits were going to get them in serious trouble. Maybe even killed. Nothing came. They waited for another 30 seconds, growing confused. One way or another, by now an ambush should have sprung. Either by them, or upon them. What were their pursuers doing? Had they just given up and gone home, paranoid about wandering into a larger force? It seemed unlikely, given they had access to sensory jutsu. After a final 30 seconds, Fu stood up from the treetop she had concealed herself in, putting her hands on her hips and blowing a raspberry. Where the heck did they go? She asked, but Sasuke didn't answer. He sank deeper in the underbrush, concealing his presence to the point he may as well have been a corpse. His instincts were screaming at him that something was wrong, but he couldn't figure out what. I'm gonna go check it out, Fu said, and Sasuke breathed out, a whisper that only she would be able to hear. Stay, he breathed, and Fu actually paused at the intensity in his voice. Something's wrong. Fu stayed, and they both became one with the forest, stretching their senses to the limit as they searched for their pursuers. The local wildlife was still there, the birds and deer that were everywhere in the land of frost hadn't fled. If something had happened, even the animals hadn't noticed it. But a moment later a breeze blew through the forest, and an acrid smell came with it. Sasuke breathed deeply, knowing the scent before his brain fully recognized it. Blood. As soon as the breeze passed, a steady sound followed after it. Something was being dragged over grass and dirt, and drawing closer by the second. Sasuke sank back into himself, making himself small and unnoticeable, becoming just another rabbit hiding in the undergrowth. Gradually, a figure became visible between the trees. It was a towering man, at least 7 feet tall and broad as a horse. Something huge and shapeless was slung across his back, and he was pulling a body behind him, not bothering to conceal the sound of the lifeless corpse bumping against trees and flattening the grass beneath it. He was covered in blood, so much that his skin looked red. As Sasuke watched, not breathing, the unknown ninja threw the corpse forward, letting it roll across the ground to the foot of the tree Fu was hiding in. It was a Cloud Ninja with pale skin and bright hair, and the man's chest had been torn open and shredded beyond hope of recovery. Come out, the ninja rumbled with a grin that was anything but reassuring. His teeth were like Suijutsu's, Sasuke thought. Filed, comically sharp, triangular like a shark's. You're not the ones I'm hunting. I just want to talk. Sasuke didn't dare move, and Fu wisely did the same. The man didn't wear a headband, he was a rogue, and obviously a tremendously dangerous one. They had no reason to trust his word. Besides that, the ninja's presence couldn't be mistaken. Obito, the fourth Hokage, Nagato, Sasori, Orochimaru, Itachi, those were the only shinobi Sasuke knew that had carried this unmistakable fatal gravity with them. This man was completely out of his league. The ninja shrugged and sat down, blood dripping off of him onto the grass. He crossed his arms, looking around with an irritated expression. "I know you're here somewhere," he said matter-of-factly. "So we can sit together for a while, if that's what you want. It's a waste of time though." He picked something out of his teeth, and Sasuke couldn't help but imagine it was human flesh. The man's presence was just that monstrously intimidating. "I'm betting you're the Hidden Rain. Mist doesn't have anyone that can fly like that. I was happy to stay out of your fucker's way, but things are going to get serious." "Well, more serious. A little communication couldn't hurt." He snorted. "Actually, it might, but things aren't exactly going great for Frost right now. It's worth the risk, don't you think?" Sasuke still didn't respond, and Fu followed his lead. The ninja growled like a wild boar. "Look, I'm trying to be nice here. If you're not in charge, I'll find you and torture you until you lead me to whoever is. I'm not a patient man, make a damn decision." As far as Sasuke and his Sharingan could tell, the man wasn't lying, either about being their enemy, or torturing them if they didn't reveal themselves. He made the executive decision, the kind of decision he'd been promoted to make in the first place, and stood up, revealing himself. The rogue locked onto him like a bloodhound, his head snapping towards Sasuke's position the millisecond he moved at all. "Stay hidden," he commanded, and Fu obeyed, obviously just as worried as him. The rogue scoffed, and Sasuke stepped forward despite his body screaming at him that he was approaching a dangerous predator. The blood-soaked ninja's eyes were drawn to his own, and Sasuke saw the spark of recognition at the Sharingan in them. He was glad he hadn't activated his Mangekyo. Obito had told him plenty of stories of ninja trying to steal his unique eyes. "I'm here. What do you want?" "An Uchiha," the man said, looking him up and down and not seeming impressed. He stayed seated, obviously not seeing Sasuke as any sort of threat. "I didn't know Rain had any of you." "Just me," Sasuke said, his throat dry. "I'm Sasuke." "You." "Kisame," the rogue said, uncrossing his arms and leaning forward. "You're lucky, Sasuke. I don't mind Uchiha too much, so you'll do. So you're with the Nation of Rain?" "I am," he said, indicating his headband. "Great. Take me to your leader," Kisame demanded, and Sasuke raised an eyebrow. "You can understand why I'd be hesitant to do that," he said, and Kisame shrugged. "Sure. But I don't give a fuck. I don't want to talk with some middleman who'll twist my words around to make themselves look better," he said, a dark look in his beady eyes. "I have things to say to whoever is in charge of you all, and no one else." "What kind of things?" Sasuke said, and Kisame smiled, looking for all the world like a greedy shark. "Is this how you want to do this?" he said as he stood up, somewhat similar to a fallen tree righting itself. "I already told you dash. If you want to cooperate, threatening me isn't the way to do it," Sasuke said bluntly, feeling a bit of perhaps unearned confidence. "I can tell my commander that you want to speak to her, and have her meet you somewhere. But we're not going to take you back to the main force." He spread his hands, giving the towering man a frank grimace. "You're obviously dangerous. I couldn't lead you to my allies in good conscience. Tell me where and when you want to meet her, and I will pass the message along." Kisame stalked forward, glowering down at him, but Sasuke held his ground. He heard Fu shift above, and Kisame obviously did as well, but the man completely ignored the Jinchuriki despite her sudden spike of intense chakra, glaring down at Sasuke from barely a foot away. He held the stare for several crushing seconds, then chuckled and backed away, circling around and looking up at the tree Fu was hidden in. "You Uchiha all know each other, right?" he said abruptly, and Sasuke didn't immediately answer. "Close-knit, secretive bastards. That kind of clan." "Generally," Sasuke said without committing, and Kisame sneered at the non-answer. Obito Uchiha, he said, and Sasuke stilled his surprise at his sensei's name spilling from the blood-soaked ninja's lips. You know him. He's my teacher, Sasuke said, not sure if he was signing his death warrant with honesty but feeling coldly sure that lying would be dangerous, and Kisame stopped, looking back at him suspiciously. Ran off to rain, he muttered, starting to pace again. You're one of the brats he talked about. You, and the pink one, and the Hokage's son, huh? Are you all here, or have they dropped out of the race? You've met him? Sasuke asked, shocked at the invisible connection the rogue had suddenly revealed between them. Obito was a prolific guy, sure, but when would he have had a chance to meet someone like this? It must have been after they'd left Konoha. Kisame even seemed to know Sakura and Naruto. We had a nice conversation, Kisame said without a hint of irony, which only raised more questions. He was an upright guy. Didn't even try to kill me, even after a bad first impression. He stopped, a crooked grin creeping across his face. Did you learn that from him, Sasuke Uchiha? Are you an upright guy? Sasuke found himself pondering the question more than he probably should have. He got the feeling that what Kisame considered an upright guy was someone who was like Obito, honest, principled, kind. The paradox of that impression coming from a guy literally covered in blood was a little too much for him. I try to be, he said. Kisame snorted. What do you think ninja are good for? The rogue asked, and Sasuke was thrown once more. Not once in this conversation had he felt like he'd fully held the initiative. He couldn't square the philosophical question with the threat of torture, the offer of cooperation, and the connection with Obito. It was just too strange. Kisame was testing him as only a lone deranged shinobi could. It might be that if he answered wrong, he'd kill him, even if he apparently liked his sensei. Tired of calculating, Sasuke decided to surrender to the situation, and answered from the heart. Killing other ninja, he said bluntly. I've heard a lot of people dress it up, but since Cloud attacked Rain, it seems like that's all ninja do. Kill each other, and kill people who end up in the way. Damn right, Kisame said with a toothy grin and a mocking clap. But you still think you're trying to be an upright guy? I was raised this way, Sasuke said. I'm doing the best with what I have, I'm trying to keep my friends safe, and I'm trying to make sure Cloud can't ever do what it did again. Is that good enough for you? You know what? Kisame shot back without hesitation. He crossed his arms, rooting himself in place. It is, you earnest little shit. You two really are cut from the same damn cloth. Not able to tell if he was being praised or insulted, Sasuke stood there without saying a word. Eventually, Kisame spoke once more. Get your boss, and tell her to meet me here as soon as she can. You guys would be idiots to let Cloud launch their attack on Mist without resistance, and I doubt Kirigakure has roped you in on their defense plans. They never learned how to share their toys, especially with outsiders. He chuckled to himself, but Sasuke didn't find it particularly funny. But I've been fighting by myself for a long time now, maybe teaming up will be fun, just for the novelty. Sasuke didn't move until Kisame made a dismissive gesture, flinging droplets of blood across the grass from his fingertips. Go on. Promise. Even if you turn your backs, I won't chase. His smile, so like Suijutsu's, made Sasuke twitch. Plenty of time for that later. Sasuke left without another word, and Fia followed right behind him, zipping from tree to tree before jumping down to run side by side with him. He glanced over at her, finding her grinning and pale. Wow. She whispered. That guy's terrifying. What's his deal? I have no idea, Sasuke said, already running through the implications of the meeting and what exactly he would say to Konan. Hey, there's an incredibly powerful rogue ninja that's volunteering to help us fight Cloud. Just like Itachi, actually, isn't it weird how I keep attracting them to us? It's like I'm magnetic or something. He found himself laughing, and Fia laughed along with him despite not knowing what was running through his head, just feeding off their shared relief. They giggled together as they raced through the forest, and the manic sound only barely broke off before they rejoined the rest of Rain's ninja. ####. The daylight hours passed quickly and without violence. Rain, Mist, and Cloud made their plans for the inevitable battle that evening. Konan met with Kisame, a short intense meeting which secured his cooperation with Rain for the immediate future. Omegakuer had attempted to recruit the rogue ninja many years before, but had given up after both their agents sent to do so had been killed. Their bodies had never been recovered. Konan remembered this, but she was a superb ninja, and ninja were excellent at putting aside grudges in the face of a shared enemy. The forces massing for what would become known as the Battle of Hakata were some of the most dangerous and impressive in the history of shinobi warfare. The battle would have 5 sides: the Nation of Rain, the Hidden Cloud, the Hidden Mist, and 2 separate rogue ninja powerful enough to be considered military forces on their own. It would feature more than 1,200 ninja, 9 of which were S-rank, and would involve 4 of the 9-tailed beasts, more than had ever participated in a single battle before. At 7 p.m. precisely, with the sun half vanished and painting the ocean a bloody red, the Hidden Cloud's kludged together navy set sail for the southern isles that constituted the land of water and the village hidden in the mist, intent on destroying their rival village's military power and any hope of them continuing to fight the war. 850 ninja of Kyumegakuer were part of the attack fleet, either ferried by ships or running atop the water alongside them, though several hundred of them were carried by something infinitely more grand than man-made ships. They were shadowed at a distance from the air by the forces of the Nation of Rain, beneath the waves by Kisame Hoshigaki, and by Ataki Uchiha, who simply moved across the sea like a living shadow. 30 minutes into their journey, with the city of Hakata a bright blur on the horizon, they were met by the forces of the Hidden Mist. The Hidden Mist's defense force was the best it could muster, 300 ninja, an enormous commitment by the village's ninja after the 550 it had already dispatched to the Land of Frost. Outnumbered nearly 3 to 1, they nonetheless assaulted Cloud's navy with desperate and vicious strength, knowing that defending their village directly would leave Kirigakuer's already battered infrastructure and population too damaged to continue. Rain and the rogue ninja entered the battle almost immediately after it was joined, which prompted Cloud to enact its true plan. Fought atop the greedy and pitiless sea, naval battles could be nightmares. Shinobi naval battles were the stuff nightmares could only dream to be. By the battle's conclusion, the fate of the Land of Frost and the course of shinobi history would be decided. ####. Following from high above, even Sasuke couldn't pinpoint the exact moment the battle began. One moment, Cloud's flotilla was pressing forward; the next, a massive fog bank whipped up out of nowhere, fires and bursts of lightning began to break out, and the battle was well underway. There was no ritual or grandeur to it. At the same time, a massive shape reared up before the fleet, appearing in a burst of red-tinged smoke and letting out a massive roar. It was a familiar sound, the same bone-shaking announcement that Sasuke had heard back in the Hidden Leaf. The Sanbai had been unleashed. Mist clearly hadn't had the time or need to reseal it into a new Jinchuriki. Instead, the tailed beast was unleashed directly into the fleet, plowing ahead in a rage like a runaway train and smashing the foremost ship to pieces in seconds. Mist ninja leapt out of the water like well-armed fish and Kumo's shinobi swarmed to meet them, pouring out of the carriers they'd constructed and engaging in a brutal life-or-death struggle atop the churning white and red waters that the sea was quickly becoming. Go! Konan gave the command and nearly 60 ninja dove down out of the sky, screaming down on the fleet from more than a mile away and 2,000 feet up. Just like at Kushiro, some had been granted paper wings, while others rode with few or upon Deidara's constructs. Sasuke was one of the latter, tightly gripping the shoulder of the former stone ninja. Deidara was muttering to himself, unintelligible words spilling out of him as his chakra spurred the clay dragon onwards. They know we're coming. Nono was the passenger right behind Sasuke, and he shifted to hear her against the rushing wind. Did you feel that? He had. There was an enormously powerful sensor with the fleet, or perhaps several, and their invisible eyes had swept across all of them. With remarkable coordination, the rearmost ships began to turn to guard against the rain assault. Others were spinning towards unseen enemies, perhaps more mist shinobi, or either of the rogue ninja that had determined Cloud to be their enemy. The display just made Sasuke more confused, and that confusion stretched like a rubber band ready to snap as the moment of contact drew closer and closer. Even with this ramshackle fleet, Cloud's command and control with a large number of ninja was almost miraculous. From what his Sharingan could see, it was just as effective as Konoha's own reliance on long-distance telepathy, which spoke to a remarkable amount of discipline and training. So why throw themselves into the teeth of 2 hidden villages? They were missing critical information, but it was too late to fret about that now. Off you go. Deidara said gleefully. 30 ninja leapt from his dragon, including Sasuke, widely dropped in along the breadth of the fleet. Naruto and Sakura were elsewhere, gifted with wings along with Jiraiya, but Nono was right behind Sasuke, and they landed less than 10 feet apart in the churning seas. Their aim wasn't complicated, sinking the fleet was the first and only priority. Sasuke threw a fireball into the hull of the nearest ship, expecting it to blow a hole in the waterline and drown it in short order. Instead, his jutsu was intercepted, a lightning bolt burned clean through it and then impossibly redirected before hitting the ocean, flinging itself in Sasuke's direction. If it weren't for the Sharingan, it would have struck him head-on. Instead, he just barely leapt out of the way, slamming into the side of another ship and scrambling up the hull as he searched for the source of the impossibly precise jutsu. Nono had gone the other way, and Sasuke saw her target as he reached the deck of the ship, a half-dozen cloud shinobi all coming for him at once. None of them made him worry half as much as the ninja he saw on the deck of the opposite ship, the source of the self-guiding lightning bolt. As Sasuke started fighting for his life, the cloaked man called out to him, ignoring Nono as she approached him and cut an intercepting cloud ninja's throat with a chakra scalpel. "This is a lucky day, Uchiha," Kakuza the Immortal rumbled, his deep voice distinct even over the sound of countless explosions, screams, and the roar of the Sanbai as it rampaged deeper into the fleet. "I think you'll be just what I needed." Nono and Sasuke were both engaged in fights with multiple ninja, nightmare scenarios only made worse by the rocking of the ocean, the threat of collateral damage, and the general chaos of the sudden battle. However, Kakuza thankfully continued to ignore Nono. He bent down and leapt, the deck under his feet shattering with the force of the leap, and covered the 80 feet between his ship and Sasuke's in the blink of an eye. Sasuke swept one man's feet from under him, broke another's nose with a precise elbow, and then Kakuza was there and Sasuke was immediately stuck in an even more intense hand-to-hand battle. The ninja was huge and fast, and beneath his cloak even Sasuke's Sharingan couldn't fully predict the movement of his limbs. They seemed longer than they should be, striking out with inhuman speed and bending at impossible angles. Kakuza's chakra surged and burst with every blow, but it was less the movement of living chakra and more like a nest of vipers wildly writhing, coiling, and uncoiling to a rhythm Sasuke couldn't find. He took 2 nasty hits in short order, one to the ear and another to the solar plexus, but was trying to give as good as he could get. The other cloud ninja backed up, unwilling to get caught in the middle of such a fierce fight or busy with other enemies, and Sasuke tried to regain the initiative. "I thought you were dead," he hissed through gritted teeth, throwing himself into a series of whirling kicks and trying to knock Kakuza's head off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a row, each redirected with unerring precision by the mercenary. A Rasengan formed like a violet apple in Sasuke's hand. "Didn't you already die? What, 4 times? Any shinobi can fake their death," Kakuza said, catching Sasuke's wrist and flipping him to the ground. He struggled, trying to kick his way back to his feet, but Kakuza continued to catch or redirect every blow, his burning green eyes glaring down at Sasuke. "You were working with your brother, I'm sure. It was a nice show you two put up back in Waterfall, but don't think it could fool someone like me." "Just a coincidence," Sasuke grunted, giving up on rising and switching to grappling. He twisted around the arm and pulled, confident that he could at least shatter the elbow and break free. Instead, Kakuza's limb bent like rubber. Sasuke realized in an instant that he'd miscalculated. The mercenary didn't have any bones to break. "Which is why Taka's here as well," Kakuza said dryly, lifting Sasuke up with one arm. He tossed him up and caught him by the throat, and didn't flinch even when Sasuke seized a knife from his vest and stabbed it deep into his wrist, twisting it to destroy the muscle. "I can feel him." String and itcher erupted from the wound, wrapping around Sasuke's mouth and head, and he kicked out, eyes wide as fear pounded through his body. It was just like with Orochimaru, the thing he was fighting wasn't human, it just looked like one. He needed the Rasengan, the only jutsu in his arsenal that could destroy a twisted body like Kakuza's, but there was no chance of him managing it now. The mercenary's grip tightened, and the world started going dark as Sasuke felt the man's hand settle over his heart. "Do you think he'll come running if I rip this out?" Kakuza said, the contempt in his eyes deeper than the ocean. Or was he just using his little brother too? Black flames erupted across Kakuzu's back without warning, and he hissed in pain. Sasuke didn't question it, he just swung upwards with desperate strength, blue flames erupting across his kunai in an imitation of his mother's technique. The flame blade sheared right through Kakuzu's arm and Sasuke fell away, the kunai crumbling to ash in his hands. However, even disconnected from his body, Kakuzu's hand kept squeezing, determined to choke the life out of Sasuke even as the man turned away with impossible flames flickering across his body and stared up at his new target, murderous chakra flaring out of him and splintering the polished wooden deck all across the ship. Sasuke tried to rip the hand off, on the edge of consciousness as he scrambled away, and slowly but surely the residual chakra and life in the hand faded, leaving him just barely able to pry it off his throat. "I don't suppose I could pay you to forget about this," Itachi said. His brother had appeared from nowhere as he always did, casually resting on the guardrail up near the bridge of the ship as the commanding Cloud Ninja looked on, bewildered. Kakuzu slowly shook his head, the body beneath the cloak squirming as the Amaterasu ate away at it and revealed what was beneath. Sasuke sucked in a breath, revolted. Orochimaru's pale, alien body filled with eyes and bones had been grotesque. Kakuzu's was a corpse stitched together, tendrils of black worms wriggling out of every orifice and questing out of the stitches, screeching to escape the fire. 5 masks of intricate design were placed across the body, and as he and Itachi watched one of them cracked and turned to ash as Kakuzu's body split, he stepped out of the husk of his old form like a snake shedding its skin, leaving the Amaterasu and the ashen mask behind. The black flames began to slowly but surely spread across the deck, sending Cloud Ninja running to abandon ship. "I know it was you that made me put grudges above good money," Kakuzu growled, truly growling, sounding nothing like a human being. "Unfortunately for you, that hasn't changed." Itachi said, glancing at Sasuke and shrugging. "All right then." Kakuzu threw himself forward, and Itachi danced back. For a moment, Sasuke was paralyzed between fighting alongside his brother and escaping the rapidly spreading Amaterasu, before Itachi glanced at him. An invisible genjutsu wormed across the space between them, and Sasuke heard his brother's voice like he was standing right next to him. "Go on," Itachi said. "I've killed him twice already, after all." This wasn't the time to go after Black Zetsu. Sasuke realized that was the real source of his hesitation and he turned and ran, leaping over a curtain of black flames and diving down into the churning waves. The water was red, he realized after a moment, and full of ninja and animals both. Summons were everywhere, octopi, turtles, dolphins, squids, and sharks battling for dominance and tearing each other apart, as well as any ninja that were unlucky enough to fall into the midst of them. Sasuke darted about like a fish himself, breaching and flinging himself up onto the half-shattered hull of a neighboring ship, looking around as he found himself in the center of the hurricane. The fleet was in disarray, the Sanbai had made its way to the center and was flailing about in a rage, swamping ships with huge waves as ninja from all sides fought on its back. Fu, Deidara, and Konan were still fighting from the air, throwing down bombs, flinging paper projectiles and assistants, and swooping down like a bird of prey to scoop up Cloud Ninja. Even in the midst of Kakuzu's battle with Itachi, a lightning bolt burst from the fracas and was once again impossibly redirected, piercing right through the heart of Deidara's dragon and leaving it falling from the sky like a dead bird. Deidara leapt from its back with a lunatic's shout, a spread of explosives blasting 2 ships to pieces as he landed on the water and spat out a swordfish that took off with a burst of speed, carving between the ships of the fleet with the ninja clinging to its back and laughing madly. A rain ninja fell past him, both arms severed and the top of his head gone, and Sasuke's eyes were drawn down back towards the ocean. He blinked, not sure what he was seeing. Countless fish were bubbling to the surface, strange misshapen things he'd never seen before, their bodies had been burst by some unspeakable pressure. Was there another invisible battle happening below, or was there another source? 100 feet away, a ship was cut in half as a blade of ice and water wickered out and split it. Sakura and Naruto were over there, he was sure, probably fighting with Jiraiya. The way things were going it seemed like Cloud was losing, but fighting hard for it. At this rate, both forces would be completely destroyed. The flames of the Amaterasu had spread completely across the ship. Itachi and Kakuzu were dueling on now, transforming it into a gladiatorial arena like something out of an ancient empire. The ship groaned and cracked, on the verge of disintegrating as the 2 S-rank ninja battled across it. In a fight between ninja like this, the battle would often be decided by the first mistake, and its length would be determined solely by how long that mistake took. Here, now, Sasuke saw it happen with the crystal clear clarity that only his eyes could offer. His brother was faster than Kakuzu and more decisive, and the immortal was losing the battle by degrees as Itachi chipped away at his defenses with fire jutsu and exploding clones. He was staunchly avoiding Itachi's eyes, and Sasuke knew in his gut that must have been how Kakuzu had been dispatched the first time. His body, as strange as it was, still had a chakra system, so the Tsukuyomi would spell his defeat without question. He had sensory jutsu of some kind, but fighting without looking at your opponent was difficult no matter what, and so Itachi was hemming him into a corner, bringing him closer to the ever-spreading Amaterasu that would end him. Kakuzu grew desperate, striking back more ferociously with whip-like arms and nearly punching a hole clean through Itachi with a wind jutsu that resembled an incorporeal spear. But in the decisive moment, he spun to deliver a blast of fire, the masks all across his body wriggling, and Itachi was there to meet him, locking eyes from less than a foot away. Sasuke saw the Tsukuyomi fire off like a brilliant coherent beam of black light, and it struck Kakuzu right in the eye, ripping through his chakra system with savage disregard. The shock of such a strong genjutsu would incapacitate him for hours, regardless of his mental toughness. The battle was over. His brother relaxed, just by the smallest of fractions, as Kakuzu teetered and began to collapse back into the black flames. But it wasn't Kakuzu's recklessness that had been the mistake. It was Itachi's moment of relaxation. Kakuzu's stumble turned to certainty, and neither Sasuke nor his brother had a prayer of reacting as the immortal kicked. It was a jutsu done without visible hand signs, but not a very dangerous one. It created a massive gust of wind that ripped Itachi off his feet, flinging him nearly 100 feet straight up and leaving him in sight of the whole battlefield. Sasuke felt in his heart that it wasn't only his own disbelieving eyes that were drawn up to his brother as Kakuzu leapt after him. For a moment, the whole battle paused, every eye drawn to the 2S rank ninja at the apex of it all. The immortal reared up as his hands clasped together in a brutish double fist, his body horrifically bulky as strings formed into muscles so oversized they burst the skin in places, exposing more ichor. Itachi was already going through a counter jutsu, and flaming shuriken ripped gaping holes in Kakuzu's body in several places. But it didn't stop him. One of the masks shattered, but Kakuzu still brought both fists down in a hammer blow. Itachi barely had enough time to guard his head with both arms. The impact was so loud that it was clear despite the distance and clamor. Sasuke watched as one of Itachi's arms splintered, the bone piercing through the skin. His brother was thrown down into the ocean with such tremendous force that it was a wonder he wasn't splattered across the sea. Instead, he bored a hole straight through the water, plunging down more than 200 feet and beyond even Sasuke's sight before the impact hole closed with an enormous crash and a huge spray of water that fountained so high that it soaked every ship in the fleet, raining down living and dead fish, ninja, and summons across the battlefield. Sasuke was so shocked that he had no idea what to think. How could Kakuzu have neutralized the Tsukuyomi? Was his brother dead? Was Black Zetsu dead? Could the thing drown? No, it probably didn't have lungs, so suffocation or drowning would be impossible. But the same didn't go for Itachi. He had competing urges to dive after his brother and rejoin the battle, but the choice was impossible. To lose him so soon after learning he could be saved would be painful beyond words. Fortunately, someone made the decision for him. Nono slammed into the hull next to him, her face and hands covered in blood. "Sasuke," she said curtly. "Snap out of it." A flash of light burst out on the other side of the fleet, so huge and blinding that even Sasuke was left with a burn on his vision for several seconds. "We're still dash." There was another tremendous roar, and Sasuke's attention was split once more. On either side of the fleet, two huge monsters were emerging from the sea. To the south, something poked up out of the water without form or color. Toxic gas spewed off and fouled the waters around it, turning them sickly purple and green. It lurched forward, its touch melting the nearest ship and sending all the ninja fighting atop it fleeing into the water, where all those that didn't wear mist's mark collapsed, spasming and dying as the toxins filling the air overcame them. It was, essentially, a massive slug, and it only took a glance for Sasuke to understand that this was Kirigaku's trump card, their second-tailed beast, the Rokubai. It was here to finish what the Sanbai had started, and bury Cloud's assault at sea. But just seconds later as the rumbling continued, Something breached to the north, crashing down upon the sandby and crushing it under its bulk. It was massive, like a moving mountain, and Sasuke stared without comprehension at the impossible sight. It wasn't a tailed beast, though it looked like the one it had just crushed into the depths. It was a turtle, a massive turtle that was surely several thousand feet long and had a small mountain atop its back, a mountain covered in fortifications. A mobile, underwater fortress had just breached south of the fleet, and now across the entire battlefield Cloud Ninja were retreating towards it with mad urgency. Sasuke blinked, everything coming together. An island turtle. This was an island turtle, just like Jiraiya had told them about. If what he'd said about them growing to be miles long was true, this one was quite young, but it was working with the hidden cloud, serving them as a living carrier base. And it was a true ninja fortress. Some shinobi had launched attacks at it as it surfaced, mainly Deidara, who was airborne once more, but even the ninja's deadly explosives had been turned away by an invisible barrier technique that covered the whole turtle. It only took a moment of analysis for Sasuke to determine its purpose, keeping out danger, including the pressure of the sea, and letting in friendly ninja. Not a very complicated technique, but powerful for that simplicity, and more than enough to turn away most attackers. Getting inside would probably be as simple as stealing a cloud headband, but then you'd be fighting an entrenched enemy on their own fortifications, and if the turtle submerged once more, you'd be trapped behind the barrier with the enemy. This was what they had missed. The fleet had been a distraction, meant to bait out a counter-attack that this island turtle fortress would then crush. Cloud had outplayed both their opponents, relying on their desperation to blind them. But still, Sasuke thought. Even if it was an impressive fortress, there were three-tailed beasts here, all of them fighting against Kumo. If they thought the turtle wouldn't be killed, the fortress destroyed, they were delusional. The forces arrayed against them were just too dangerous, at best, it would be mutual destruction. So why dash? No, he said, suddenly filled with cold certainty. We've got to get out of here. Sasuke, she said, glancing over at him. Just like him, she'd been putting the pieces together, but her conclusion had been different. She was an experienced ninja that had internalized long ago she may have to sell her life to stop the enemy. In that respect, she and Sasuke were very different. Don't die, okay? They're retreating, Sasuke said, looking around to find his friends. Fear was overwhelming him, no matter how hard he tried to crush it. There was an anticipation filling him, a familiar kind that he'd only felt once in his life before. Despite the dread, there wasn't an ounce of doubt in him. They're trying to draw mist in. They're going to fire the cannon. Obito Sensei Chapter 86. Beyond Frost, his own prisoner. Though he wouldn't know it until later, Obito Uchiha was descending into Naka Shrine at precisely the same time a calamity was descending on the land of Frost. There was a sixth sense pric cling at him, but he ignored it. Over the last day, his eye had been buzzing constantly, burning his whole body with boiling chakra that raced from the base of his skull to the tips of his fingers and toes and back again. He felt swollen and sore and eager, like a runner ready to sprint forward at any second. It had been the same way when Kakashi died, the burning feeling, the overwhelming sensation of power. His eye was on the verge of awakening, which wasn't a term his clan used lightly. Chakra was composed of physical and spiritual energy, and the main Jikyo Sharingan was a wellspring of the latter. In every Uchiha he'd seen it awakened in, including himself, there had been a corresponding increase in power, precision, and chakra capacity. It hadn't been like this when he'd taken his brother's eye. In the midst of the feverish haze his body was suffering, Obito couldn't help but think it was because it hadn't been paired. Now, both eyes were undergoing a second awakening, and his body was tearing itself apart trying to contain it. But none of that was why he was here. Obito took the steps carefully, one at a time, and eventually was deposited at the bottom of the shrine. Ahead of him, Mikoto moved with much less care. She didn't have a fever. She passed into the hidden chamber without ceremony and came to a stop, waiting for him. Madara Uchiha was right where they had last left him, propped up in a plastic folding chair and staring at the ground, unmoving, unbreathing, a lifeless corpse. Even though Obito knew it would happen, it didn't creep him out any less when the body looked up at them. "You've returned," Madara rasped. "What brings you down here today?" "Good news," Obito said mirthlessly. You can die now. Madara leaned back, his head lolling as his hair brushed against the chair with a soft sound. You're mistaken, he said after a long moment. Orochimaru is still alive. I can feel it. That's very possible, ancestor, Mikoto said, her tone far more respectful than Obito's. He couldn't decide if that was justified or not. After what Madara had done, what he'd allowed to happen to Itachi, Obito couldn't feel an ounce of respect for the man. But Mikoto was more closely related to him, and more traditional besides. He couldn't begrudge her a bit of formality. But there is no chance he will be able to reanimate you again. Sasuke fought Orochimaru, and with assistance defeated him. He wasn't killed, but he is incapacitated. How? Madara said bluntly. I have no wish to experience this humiliation more than once. He took a second to ponder. Though I do not know if I would recall this experience. He turned into a tree, Obito said, just as bluntly. Madara stopped, and it felt like the room shrank, bringing them face to face even though neither of them had taken a step. His presence was just that intense. I'm sure because of his experiments on the first Hokage. But it was a tree covered in cherry non. Disgusting, Madara said succinctly. So, a living tree then. He combined the power of Uchiha and Senju, and suffered for it. That is the presence I feel, despite the shattered contract. He hummed to himself, a low sound like the earth cracking, and then slowly nodded. That is sufficient then. I will undo the jutsu. May we never meet again. As he raised his trembling hands into a seal, Obito spoke. Wait. Madara paused, empty sockets peeking up at him through bedraggled hair. Do not delay me, Obito, he bit out. This existence is agony. I will be glad to leave it. I don't exactly want you sticking around, Obito retorted. But I've been doing some digging since we started talking. Looking into the tailed beasts, your experiments, all sorts of stuff. You've sent me down a rabbit hole I can't find the bottom of. That is not my problem. Be content with your limited knowledge, if it pains you so, Madara ground out. The world is full of mysteries, most never to be solved. Sure, Obito said. But I've got one last question for you before you crawl back into hell. He waited, sure that Madara's arrogance wouldn't allow him to depart without a final chance to lord his accumulated knowledge over anyone. Mikoto patiently stood to the side, watching her ancestor with curiosity. She hadn't been here for Madara's talk with the Hokage, Obito thought, which was probably for the best. She didn't know it, but Mikoto's ideals were probably most closely aligned with Madara's out of anyone alive. Ask it then, whelp, Madara eventually managed, his hands not shifting from their half-seal. Obito crossed his arms, feeling his half-awakened eye burning behind its patch with ever-escalating fervor. Black Zetsu, he said. Your shadow, your will, whatever you want to call it. You said that you awoke your soul? That your shadow came to life and started to speak to you? Did you make that happen, or was it automatic? Madara took a long time to respond. It was not my conscious desire, he eventually decided. But it was likely my unconscious will. I had need for a servant, and my shadow became one. The purpose was clear. The hand seal firmed. That is all. That's not all, Obito said coldly. His fever had to be boiling his brain, things were melting together in a nightmarish sludge, but everything he'd been told over the last several weeks lay before him like a shogi game. He was terrible at the game, but in his manic state, the state of the board was suddenly obvious to him. You said that after forming the village with the Shodai, all the sacrifices you made to create it, its hypocrisy was suddenly too much for you. That it wasn't perfect, so you had to break away. Even try to destroy it, so that people wouldn't try to replicate it. That was why you took the Kyuubi and turned it on the Hokage, and it was right after you learned about the infinite Tsukuyomi, wasn't it? Do not recite my own history to me, Madara growled, and Obito felt a sense of threat despite the decades of infirmity keeping the corpse pinned to its chair. He ignored it. It was a sudden and destructive change in behavior that baffled everyone who knew you, he said, a sneer curling his lips. Just like my cousins. He walked forward, leaning down until he was actually face to face with the corpse. Itachi was snared by a shadow, Madara Suzuki was right, 100%. But since we spoke to you, did you ever once consider the same might have happened to you? My actions were my own, Madara said, his hands trembling in anger. My will was my own. And you he snarled, pointing at Obito, then Mikoto, then straight up, all of you have inherited it, shadow or not. You have seen the truths I've spoken, felt their necessity. Where are your students now, Obito? Are they safe? Or is the world preparing to take them from you? He reached up, so frail his fingers looked like they would snap off, and Obito didn't back away when he seized his collar and tried to pull him in closer. They are ninja in a war. War will burn away and consume all that you love. The Baijuya, the sage, our clan, they are history that paints a picture of salvation. The steps were left for us to end this failed experiment. They're not ancient history, Obito said, so matter of fact that it couldn't help but be cruel. They're living history. And I don't care about the sage's experiment one way or another. It's not what matters. He pulled away, and Madara's strength failed, leaving him grasping at air. There's something else out there. I don't know what it is, but there have been things moving around in the darkness for hundreds, thousands of years now. Your shadow, the tailed beasts, the Shinju, Princess Kaguya, it's all connected and it's still here. Madara sank back, glaring up at Obito eyelessly, and Obito scowled. You might have had a grand plan, Madara, but I think whatever's got hold of Itaki had done this before. I think that the shadow has been stalking us all for longer than we can imagine. So before you go, is there a single thing you can offer us to help clean up your mistakes? Madara stared for a long time, nearly 2 minutes. Eventually, his hands came back up into the release seal, still trembling. To the side, Mikoto shifted, her lips pursed. There's no hope for you, he said as Obito stared down at him, somehow disappointed even if he hadn't expected any better. I can feel your burgeoning power, Obito, but you will misuse it. You will be like your teacher, a man too terrified of himself to save the world. He completed the seal, and a gale whipped across the room, tearing away at Madara's parchment-like skin and starting his swift disintegration. I won't accept your regrets when we meet again. Then Madara Uchiha was gone. A corpse toppled out of the pile of ash, knocking the chair over and falling to the concrete floor with a dull thwack. Obito stared down at it. It was a young man, no one he recognized. Doubtlessly someone Orochimaru had kidnapped and murdered to serve as Madara's host. He gently bent down and picked up the body, hoisting it over his shoulder, and he turned to Mikoto. Sorry, he said. I don't know if you had anything to say to him. Mikoto smiled, if somewhat sadly. His time was long past, she said. I had nothing to say that I hadn't already. She paused. But what you told him about his will, you believe that, don't you, Obito? From the investigation you've been doing. I do, Obito said firmly, feeling like his bones were jello but steadfastly moving towards the exit. Mikoto fell in step beside him, moving to support the body he was carrying. Something has been playing games with our clan. That stone. He glanced back at it, all the way across the chamber. The legend says we got it from the sage. But if he really left the Baijuya behind to continue his plan, gave them those instructions on his deathbed, why would he give one of his son's descendants the key to ruining it all? And only one, not the other? The Senju don't have anything like that, I checked with Tsunade. He blew out a breath as they mounted the stairs, not caring to analyze Mikoto's disbelieving expression. It's not like Indra and Ajura are around to ask, anyone could have gifted the clan that thing. But for what purpose? Mikoto asked, her brow furrowed. Promising a paradise would push the clan to action, I suppose, but... She trailed off, the enormity of the conspiracy breaking over her, and Obito grimaced. Something's rotten in the world, and it's got Itaki in its grip, he said, climbing up out of the darkness with a corpse and more questions than answers. I can see it clearer than ever. My eyes will awaken tonight, I think. So tomorrow, I'm going to the land of lightning. And once I'm done with them... Obito smiled. I'm going to grab that shadow and strangle some answers out of it. Obito Sensei Chapter 87 could bring an end to everything. As far as Sakura was concerned, the battle was going pretty well until the island turtle arrived. She, Naruto, Jiraiya, and several other rain ninja had cut a swathe through Cloud's fleet, assisted in part by the swarms of ninja from the hidden mist. They had mostly stayed out of each other's way. The mist shinobi seemed content to let Rain fight their own battles, and that had been just fine to Sakura. Fighting alongside unfamiliar allies could be dangerous, especially with a jutsu like hers. Only having to worry about cutting down her enemies was ideal. Jiraiya drew her attention to the problem as he shook his head with an incredulous look. He was in sage mode, guiding them throughout the battlefield with his superhuman senses. They turned one into a fortress. He said, his toad-like eyes fixed on the massive creature as ninja swarmed towards it. Unbelievable. I'd heard dash. What should we do? Naruto cut him off, looking out over the battlefield. He'd sent out clones for triage, but his super strength had still been at Sakura's side keeping her safe. They're retreating. He's the perfect bodyguard. The closer you stick to him, the better. That thought was too cold for her but perfect for the battlefield, so Sakura didn't question it. And she liked being at Naruto's side, he made her feel safe and warm. The memory of the impulsive kiss was still keeping her up at night, but she didn't know how to act on it. She couldn't dream of being that impulsive again, but she wanted to be. She wanted to stop thinking and just act, no matter how impossible it was. Let them run, Jiraiya said. If the assault has failed, we've done our job here. We can leave it to Mist and their Baijuyo to clean up. He glanced back at the towering slug and the corrosive gas it was spewing. And I definitely don't want to get in that thing's way. 3 of them are here. If you had them in hand, you'd be a superpower. He's a seal master. He could help accomplish your dream. It was true, but Sakura couldn't see any way Jiraiya could be convinced to steal from the hidden mist so blatantly. Maybe if the battle had gone worse for them, but right now all the tailed beasts were either firmly out of her reach or already sealed in an ally. For now, it couldn't be helped, even if it made her heart burn from the injustice of it, they might have to let Cloud go, for now. As she watched, the turtle rocked and groaned, lashing out at the water around it. Many of the Cloud ninja had successfully retreated, but the Sanbai had returned and was obviously harrying the huge animal from below, along with everything else lurking in the water, Mist ninja, that rogue Sasuke had met named Kisame, and countless summons. The island turtle was huge, but that didn't make it invincible, which was probably why it began to sink below the waves at that moment. The water lapped against the invisible barrier surrounding it, failing to actually spill onto the top of the turtle as the ninja fortress started to vanish from sight. At the same time, Konan swept down from above. No, it wasn't the original Konan, Sakura realized after a moment. The Omekage had split herself into several smaller clones which were now rushing about the sinking fleet in violent waves, giving orders to the spread-out rain ninja. By Sakura's estimate, including her group, there were only about 20 left. They'd won, but at the cost of more than half the force. This would be their final battle in the Land of Frost, and what Konan said only confirmed that. Retreat however you can, as quickly as you can, Konan ordered urgently, a hint of fear in her eyes. Cloud is likely going to target Mist's Baijuyo with the cannon. They planned this from the start. None of them waited for another word. They just turned west and started sprinting across the rough water into the bloody sun, Naruto speaking with obvious panic to Konan. This close to Hakata? He asked, and she grimly nodded. I thought they wouldn't shoot with an occupied city in the way. They're either confident in its accuracy or they don't care, Konan confirmed. It's Sasuke's intuition, and the only reason they would try to bait out Mist's forces like this. I've sent few to tell them about the danger. If anyone can survive a close hit, it will be her. But dash. Jiraiya hissed, spinning, and looking back as he held one hand up to his head. Sakura watched him, feeling a horrible mix of disinterest, fear, and fatalism. This could be very bad. Something big just happened, he said, a rumbling dread filling his voice. Konan, they fired it. How long? She snapped, and Jiraiya shook his head. Less than a minute. He was already biting his thumb and running through a summoning jutsu, producing a tiny man-eating toad. Everyone, inside now. He'll dive as deep as he can, it might be our only chance. As the toad devoured her, Sakura looked back towards the sinking fleet, searching for Sasuke, Fyu, and Nono. She couldn't find them in the chaos, through the fire and smoke and flames and plumes of white and red water, but she could see the Rokubai rearing up, staring at the sky. Somehow, it knew just as well as Jiraiya did what was coming. It had to be a censor too. Don't die, she silently prayed as she found herself in the dark guts of the toad, pressed in alongside Naruto, Jiraiya, and Konan. She could feel the pressure around her growing as the summoned dove into the ocean, swimming down and away from the coming danger. I need you. ####. Fear was flying faster than she ever had before. She darted across the waves with such speed that the beating of her wings blew a divot in the water below her, smashing through anything that got in her way. Anywhere she found ninja that somehow hadn't gotten the message, she shouted at them. It was usually the same words. Run. Clouds using their weapon. Get out of here. Some people listened, some didn't. Few didn't have time to stop to encourage the ones that didn't. Konan's orders to her had been clear and obvious. Save everyone you can, and then get yourself out of the blast zone. She wasn't worried for herself. She had wings, she could fly faster than almost any ninja could run. And she was tough, the carapace she'd taken from Komei and covered her own body and could turn aside any blade and blunt any explosion. If worse came to worst, even if the blast that had almost destroyed a Megakuer happened right next to her, she was confident she would survive. That might have been a confidence that came from naivete, but she had it nonetheless. But she was terrified for Naruto, Sakura, and Sasuke, because none of them were as tough as her. She was terrified of what would happen to Konan, who she trusted more than any adult she'd ever met. Her heart bled for everyone that had died in the battle, all the new names she'd learned that were now drifting in the waves or had left them across frost in the days before. She'd made so many friends that the fear of losing them made it hard to breathe, and the sound of her heart hammering in her chest was deafening. Way off in the distance, beyond the horizon, she imagined she saw a flash of red. Konan had said the cannon's bomb moved faster than anything she could imagine. When it arrived, she'd probably only have a moment to react. Her friends might die in the blink of an eye. All that desperation was too much for her to handle. She started shouting inside too. Komei. Komei didn't always answer. Fia would call her aloof, but it was more that Fia pestered her all the time and she was sure the ancient demon got tired of her. It didn't hurt her feelings, it wasn't like either of them had decided to be stuck with the other. But when Komei didn't answer, she called again. Komei. I don't want anyone to die. Is there anything we can do besides running away? This time, there was a response. Everyone is going to die eventually, Few. Humans don't live for very long. But I don't want them to die now. Few said, crashing through a sinking ship without altering course as she scooped up a mist ninja trapped under a burning steel beam and threw him out to sea towards his comrades. They scooped him up with bewildered looks and continued running as she ranted to the tailed beast. There has to be something we can do. We can't let Cloud get away with this. They can't just keep killing people. Komei paused, and Fia paused too, frantically looking around for more people to warn. As far as she could tell, all the ninja were fleeing south or west. Cloud's giant turtle was totally gone, and the Sanbai was nowhere to be seen. But we're not a censor, Komei said, obviously seeing through Fia's eyes. The Rokubai was reared straight up out of the water and staring north, its distended eyes wiggling around at the top of its head in agitation. Komei heaved a sigh, a sound so human that Fia couldn't help but giggle. But the Rokubai seems to have an idea of what's happening. Maybe it has a decent host, someone like you. If you get close, we can ask. Just don't get killed by the toxic gas. Okay. Fia declared, zipping towards the towering slug. One eye swiveled down towards her in obvious curiosity as Fia flew up its body towards the head, hovering right in front of its enormous face. She looked it over, trying to figure out how they could talk, and settled on just yelling and waving her arms as hard as she could. Hey! She screamed at the top of her lungs, having already decided that obviously if there was another Jinchuriki in there it was buried under several tons of sludge and chakra. They fired their cannon. Is there anything you can do? She finished, and then blinked. She wasn't above the ocean anymore. She was in a space with no ceiling or sky, starless darkness rolling in every direction. Gentle light like that of a fire filled it, casting everything with a warm orange hue. The Rokubai was still there right in front of her, standing on the knot ground and rearing up to its full tremendous height. But it wasn't alone, there was a slender and pale boy with long dark hair sitting cross-legged in front of it, peering at her with one eye concealed by his thick hair. Fio looked back, too confused to speak, and found Komei behind her. All of Komei, she'd never seen the beast's entire form before, and that struck her even dumber. The Nanabe was a tremendous blue beetle with iridescent orange wings and a magnificent horn, so huge and awe-inspiring that Fio couldn't help but smile. "Komei," she said, and Komei shifted, 8 huge glowing eyes peering down at Fio like the face of some ancient and gorgeous armor. "You're beautiful." "That's not usually what people say," Komei said, her voice washing over Fio like a tidal wave. It was much more, and wherever they were, visions and sounds and feelings all wrapped up together and thrown at her like a ball of yarn that threatened to wrap her up and strangle her. "But thank you. Now speak quickly. This is telepathy, it's faster than using your mouth like a human, but not instant." "Okay," Fio said, before turning back towards the Jinchuriki and the Rokubai. "Hello. My name is Fio." She bowed deeply, hands on her knees, and then straightened up and started talking even faster. "I don't really know what's going on, but Komei told me I should talk to you. Cloud fired their cannon, and it's gonna hit here any second. If that happens, a lot of my friends could die. Is there anything you can do to help us?" The Rokubai bent down, its massive shadow falling over Fio, and she stared up at it. It didn't have a face, not really, just its swiveling slug-like eyes and a wide toothless mouth, but she felt like she could read its expression nonetheless. Confusion, curiosity, appraisal. She'd never met another tailed beast before, but she hadn't expected its chakra to be so different. It wasn't as big as Komei, but the feeling it was giving off was like the ocean, or a bottomless pit of mud. Deep, dark, dangerous, and mysterious. It turned farther down, looking at its Jinchuriki, who still hadn't moved. He was just staring at Fio with intense, dark eyes. He wasn't old, maybe 20-ish, but he was like the beast, intense and dark. That was, until the Rokubai spoke. "You said you couldn't do it alone." It said in the most high-pitched voice Fio had ever heard. "And here's a solution right in front of you. Convenient, Yotakata, super convenient." Fio blinked again as Komei fluttered her wings. "Lucky indeed. So you have a worthy host as well, Seiken." "I've had much worse, Seiken," the Rokubai said, rearing back up. The last one was Dash. Seiken, the Jinchuriki, Yotakata, finally spoke, his voice low and calm. "What is this, exactly?" "Tailed beast telepathy. You should be honored. It's been almost 100 years since I spoke to anyone like this," the Rokubai declared. "Besides, who cares? Your Mizukage gave her orders, didn't she? Now you won't have to disobey." "Orders? What kind of orders?" Fio said, and Yotakata looked up at her with a resigned face. "It's my duty to defend the village from Cloud's weapon," he said, and Fio made an understanding noise. That made perfect sense. Every village had to have some kind of plan to deal with the cannon, like Nagato in a Megakure. "I know the secrets of Baijuutama, do you know what that is?" Fio remembered through a half-drammed haze almost blowing up her entire village and wiped the memory away with a smile. "Kinda. But if you know how to do that, why didn't you guys just blow up Cloud's fleet with one?" "I can only do one a day," Yotakata said dourly. "Maybe your seal's made of sterner stuff, but more than that, and Seiken's chakra would melt my body." "Sorry," Seiken said, and Fio could swear the beast winked at her. "I'm too hot to handle. So I had to save my Baijuutama for a counter shot. I have a powerful sensory jutsu, the Mizukage was relying on me to detect the cannon if it fired, and take the shot out of the air." He looked down. "But I can feel it coming now, and it's just too much. I might be able to knock it off course if I was lucky, but I couldn't stop it. No matter what, the village is doomed at this rate. If Cloud finds out our countermeasure has failed, they'll target Kirigakure immediately." "Can I help?" Fio said, relief washing through her burning blood like ice water. I can give you more chakra. Or Komei could give you some. Then dash. That won't work, phew, Komei said, her voice like a winter wind. But we're lucky. This Jinchura key is a sensor, and compatible with Seiken. The buzzing of her wings intensified, filling the imaginary and infinite space with a storm. Host of Seiken, will 2 Baijuudama be enough? Yotakata stood up, staring back and forth between Fu and Komei. You're serious? He asked, and Fu nodded urgently, not entirely getting what she was agreeing to. She didn't know how to form a Baijuudama, and Komei had never offered the secret. Not that it mattered to her, before right this second, blowing up a ton of stuff hadn't been appealing to her. It might be, it would definitely divert the shot at the very least. If we weren't careful, it could hit Frost. We will combine our chakra. I will form the Baijuudama, you will guide Fu's aim, Komei said with an air of unmistakable authority. Seiken, I assume this is agreeable to you. Sure. Seiken said cheerfully. Better than exploding, for sure. Good, Komei declared. Now focus. We will only have one chance. The space started to meld together, and Fu was suddenly in 2 places at once. Here, in the telepathy place, and here, fluttering above the ocean as Komei's chakra began to coalesce around her, forming into a glowing phantom beetle. Fu felt her body turn, pushed by the chakra inside and around her, and followed the invisible force, surrendering her body to Komei's control as her seal burned. More and more Baijuyo chakra was pouring out of it, whirling in front of her with ever-increasing energy. It was just like Team 7's Raise Non, she realized. She knew how to do something like this, or at least had seen people do something like this and could imagine how it worked. She started trying to nudge the chakra along as well, but Komei rebuked her, her whole body shaking with sudden negative energy. I said focus. Connect your chakra as best humans can. Fu's senses were drawn to Seiken and Yotakata below her. She had settled on the Rokubai's head, her feet sinking into the soft slug-like flesh there. His eyes must be yours. Fu took that as literally as she did most things, and closed her eyes. She reached out with all of her other senses, trying to feel Yotakata's chakra. There were other eyes here, she realized, other sensors watching them from a distance. From cloud or mist, it didn't matter, she purged everything from her mind except the yearning to connect with Yotakata, to feel what he could feel and see what he could see. She'd only just met him, but the guy seemed cool. She didn't want him to die either, or for his village to be destroyed. As far as she was concerned, her only enemies were the Hidden Cloud, Kakuza the Immortal, and Itaki Uchiha. Everyone else deserved whatever peace they could manage. Fu couldn't have told anyone ever how she did it, but after a moment she perceived a distant string of light, like a beam of sunlight refracted through a single dewdrop. She followed it, reaching out with invisible hands and grasping it close, and the light grew, expanding and intensifying until suddenly she could see everything. It was like she was high above, staring down at the 2-tailed beasts below and barely able to see her own body. High and far away, the cannon shot was coming. It sliced across the sky like a crimson blade that was tearing open the heavens themselves and leaving a bloody wound behind, so huge and heavy and fearsome that Fu found herself shaking with excitement and dread looking at it. It was about 80 miles away. Somehow, Yotakata knew that meant they had about 23 seconds before it hit dead center on the Cloud Fleet's previous position, and Yotakata knowing it meant Fu knew it too. Their own Baijuudama would travel only a fraction of their target's speed. Yotakata, Komei, and Seiken were all running calculations that were making Fu's head spin and hurt, but somehow she kept up. She fixed her eyes on a terminal point 20 miles away, where if they fired the dual Baijuudama would intercept the cannon's shot. It was a single burning beam, but it was starting to waver and split into 8 separate attacks. If their own attacks detonated at that precise point of separation, the attack would be completely destroyed, flung out beyond the atmosphere and far away from anyone. Komei, she said, her voice vibrating from all the chakra pouring through her. I have it. The Baijuudama was forming before her and another below, 2 huge orbs of dark chakra that were so heavy that Fu could feel herself being drawn towards them. Focus, Komei demanded. Hold it. We have it, Yotakata confirmed, and despite the distance between them Fu reached out and took his hand. The mist ninja was shaking, but when she squeezed his hand he stopped, all of his chakra surging and focusing on the same terminal point she had found. "We're ready." The moment approached, but Fu's focus didn't waver. She couldn't describe the feeling she was experiencing, like her entire life had been before this moment, and that everything that came after would be separate from what came before. It was like a line had been drawn through everything, cutting open the world and revealing a new one. She'd never felt so powerful, so scared, so sure, so anything. She'd never forget the feeling as long as she lived. "All right," Yotakata said. He let go of her hand, throwing himself forward. "Let's go." All four of them released at the same time, throwing their heart and soul into the moment and forgetting everything else. Around them, the air cracked and the ocean blew away. Baijuutama. The two impossibly heavy chakra bombs exploded outwards, rotating around one another in a helix as they roared off into the sky. High above, the red light of the cannon was approaching, arcing down into a fatal fall. Their aim was perfect. Both Baijuutama struck the shot head-on and detonated. Yotakata had believed the explosion would throw the blast off course. Fu had believed the same, because their souls had been tied together in that moment and she couldn't bring herself to doubt him. But that wasn't quite what happened. Instead, the 8 beams of peeling light and energy exploded too, and everything went white hot. ####. What's happening right now is a first-time and one-time event. It has never happened before, and will never happen again in all of history. Baijuutama have collided 5 times since the sage died and left the tailed beasts his will. Siblings squabble, even if they are hundreds of feet tall and capable of obliterating mountains with their anger. Each time, the scale of destruction was extraordinary, but tailed beasts' bombs are not indiscriminate weapons. They carry their wielder's will, and unleash their energy with precision. They can be guided with incredible aim, and seldom directly damage anything beyond the immediate blast radius. They are, more so than anything else in existence, the fantasy of a bomb that destroys only its assigned target. However, the cannon's bomb was different. The cannon's bomb was unrestrained, despite how tightly controlled its vector was. It was a mindless weapon fueled by the chakra of the Haxabi and its Jinchuriki, Killer Bee. In a way, it was the perfection of the shinobi ideal that the inheritors of Indra and Asura's will had been clawing towards for thousands of years. When the chakra of 3-tailed beasts collided 8 miles in the air above the land of frost, something no one could have predicted happened. The tailed beasts were all once parts of a greater whole, and just as Fu, Yotakata, Komei, and Seiken had merged their chakra, the energy of both Baijuutama and the cannon's shot combined in an astonishing synthesis. It became greater than the sum of its parts, achieving a quasi-divinity for a fraction of a second. Then, without a guiding will, it detonated. It was, without much exaggeration, an apocalypse. A distended fireball bloomed in the sky, 6 miles in diameter. For a full second, there was a rising sun to match the setting one to the west. The heat of the blast instantly incinerated everything within a mile of the fireball, boiled hundreds of billions of gallons of the ocean, and blinded anyone that directly witnessed it without sufficient protection or distance. This included Deodara, who was both figuratively and literally blinded by the majesty of the detonation. He stared directly up into the apocalypse and cried tears of joy for the entire duration of the explosion, miraculously surviving every calamity it caused. Every other ninja present at the Battle of Hakata had the good sense to look away, or were shielded by the ocean. When Sasuke Uchiha looked down and contemplated diving into the ocean to avoid the blast, knowing he would be too slow, he didn't have time to blink before a great white shark hit him like a torpedo from below at a significant fraction of the speed of sound, swallowing him in a single gulp. The fireball was so huge and so bright that its light could be seen from almost clear across the continent. Climbing out of the darkness of Naka Shrine, Obito and Mikoto Uchiha could see it through the thick trees of the Uchiha estate. It solidified in Obito an unstoppable resolve to end the war that would push him forward for the rest of his life. Sitting atop his tower in a megakure and keeping watch over his home, Nagato Uzumaki could see it, and more so than almost anyone else on the planet could feel it as well. It drove him to rash action almost immediately, his caution and hesitation chipped, on the edge of shattering. Somewhere else in a megakure, Karen Uzumaki started crying. The sound could not be described. No human would ever hear it and live, but the distant boom of its echo was also felt all around the world. Nearly every window within 800 miles of the blast, so those within the lands of lightning, frost, waterfalls, rivers, fire, springs, and water, broke. Birds fell from the sky, nocturnal animals refused to leave their dens, and a dull rumble carried through the air for minutes afterwards, filling anything that heard it with dread. A superstorm raged across the land of frost, a hurricane, earthquake, and firestorm all rolled into one. Impossibly strong winds crumbled away the summits of mountains while new ones formed as the earth grinded against itself. Towns collapsed into fresh chasms, were crushed by avalanches, or simply fell over as the earth shook beneath them. All of Hakeda's ordinary inhabitants had been killed instantly by fireball and shockwave manifesting a mere 20 miles away, and the city immediately crumbled into the boiling sea just minutes later, erasing the largest mass grave in history. The newly formed bay was massive, but would not be used for years out of superstition of the vengeful dead. By the end of the cataclysm, 12% of the population of the land of frost would be dead or severely injured. 100 miles away, the court of the lightning daimyo shifted on its foundations high in the mountains. This was rightfully seen as a terrible omen, not to mention a structural danger, and so the daimyo and his court were relocated to a secondary palace even farther from the border, at the edge of the lightning peninsula. It wouldn't save them in the end. Shinobi near the blast fared the best they could. The cloud ninja that had successfully baited the trap and escaped aboard the brave island turtle Shinpi, son of Genbyu, were terrified as the ocean boiled around them. However, they were protected from the worst of the blast by the depths of the ocean and the powerful barrier that surrounded them. Their commander was C, a brilliant censor and the Raikage's most trusted lieutenant. He had volunteered for this dangerous mission and had accomplished it to the best of his ability, but he had never imagined the results of the cannon and Baijuodama clashing. To his sensory abilities, the blast had been a billion times brighter than the flashbang jutsu he had used on so many of Cloud's enemies. It scoured his mind clean and left him in a permanent vegetative state. With their commander mission killed and their morale shattered, Shinpi and the Cloud Force retreated, unwilling to face 3 Baijuya without the cannon's support. The Mist Forces comported themselves with absolutely admirable discipline. Their numbers had been halved by the defensive action and halved again by the blast, but they reorganized in the face of the brutal casualties, assisting defend comrades and recapturing the Sanbai after only 18 minutes. The Baijuya was led into its emergency vessel, an enormous clay molding of a weeping baby covered in ancient sealing techniques. The rain forces were decimated. Of the 22 surviving rain ninja, 5 were knocked out and drowned, 1 was permanently placed in a religious ecstasy that left him unable to act, and 3 more immediately gave up on being shinobi and fled the battlefield. Konan survived, insulated from the shockwave by her paper body, but found afterwards that no matter what she did, the tears would not stop flowing. She organized the surviving rain ninja and fled west, seeking shelter in the burning wilderness. In the ocean, Jiraiya's summoned toad was boiled by the ocean and pulped by the shockwave, disgorging its cargo and unable to reverse summon to Mount Mayaboka thanks to the chakra shock. Konan's clone dissipated as Team 7 and Jiraiya were left stunned and drowning in the burning abyssal water, though they only drifted for seconds before a giant shark devoured them all. Fu and Yotakata, along with their Baijuya, had the strangest and most horrible experience of all. They were transported high above to the heart of the fireball, and witnessed everything as if they were gods that had wrought the devastation. But they didn't do so alone. ####. Fu's shirt hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed from wonderful to dreadful. There at the roof of the world, she watched the land of frost burn like a floating ghost, suspended at the center of it all. Everything her chakra swept over, she felt. Everything their chakra swept over, they felt. It was too much for her to bear, but up here, bodiless, she could not fall, cry, or hurt. All she could do was turn towards her companions, who were all watching with the same quiet, infinite horror. "Why did you do this?" she asked. She wasn't talking to Yotakata. There was another man up here, tall and dark-skinned, wearing sunglasses like he'd come prepared to stare into a new sun. There were tears running from under them. "Didn't you know this would happen?" "I didn't know, yo," he said, staring down at the burning country. "I was just following my brother." "You're the Hakusabi Jinchuriki," Yotakata said, similarly transfixed. "Killer B." "Lord B, that's me," B said. He sank down, and Fu followed him, feeling everything he was and more. They were all tied together now, like her and Yotakata had been, to the point she couldn't tell if the hatred she was feeling towards the Cloud Ninja was hers, Yotakata's, or his own. But I really didn't know it would be like this. This is the second time now, Fio said, feeling more clarity than she ever had before. You blew up a mecha gear, killed thousands. Now you've done it again. How could you not know? I've fought in wars, B said, his voice faint as they were buffeted by winds of death. Killed scores, did it with swords. When you end a guy face to face, it's easy to pretend that that's that, you can keep up the pace. So when I got asked to push a button. His face twisted, the terror and guilt pouring out of him as if from a mortal wound. It was a rush, I didn't fuss. Firing the biggest gun ever made is cool, you know. He sank in on himself, clutching at his head. Fool, yeah fool. We're all mass murderers now, Yotakata said clearly. But you're the one that started this. We can't forgive you for that. Fio nodded, feeling her own words in Yotakata's mouth. After a second, B shook his head. I can't either, B said. He tried to rhyme again, and just as with Yotakata, Fio felt the words twist and fall apart in her own mouth. I'm sorry. I can't make this up, I can't keep up. It's just as I feared, B, an unfamiliar voice cut in, and Fio looked back to find three-tailed beasts towering over them. Kome, Seiken, and what must have been the Haxabi, it was a huge octopus with the torso and head of a bull, with an unmistakably heartbroken look on its face. Using our power like this, the Raikages made a huge mistake. After this, the whole world will want Kumigaku's head. When this link ends, I suggest that we flee. True to the Haxabi's words, Fio could feel the ethereal connection fading. The fireball was going out, and their shared chakra was dissipating with it. She could feel her own body again, drifting in the burning ocean below and surrounded by countless dead fish. You'll abandon your own village? Your bro, she asked the Jinchuriki, but he seemed nearly catatonic. The Haxabi spoke in his stead. There's no value in mindless loyalty. Would you stand by someone that had set you on this kind of path? It asked, and Fio shook her head. Right. So we won't either. His brother, well, he chose this path, far more than B could. Where will you go? She asked, and the Haxabi bent down towards her. Will you hunt us? It asked, and Fio felt its fear, her fear, and tears in her eyes. B did not deserve this, it is as much my mistake for not stopping him. It closed its eyes. I have always been used as a weapon, but I knew this technology was something new and dangerous. I don't know, Fio said honestly. I don't know what to do about any of this. I have friends that have said that what's going on can't be allowed to continue. She hadn't felt Sakura and Naruto and Sasuke's deaths below, but that didn't mean anything. Fio balled her hands into fists, glaring up at the Haxabi. And they're obviously right. This can't ever be allowed to happen again. If B refused to use the cannon, would they put you in another Jinchuriki, Haxabi? It's possible, the Haxabi said after a moment's consideration. The link was on the edge of breaking now, but Fio's rage was keeping it intact. The Raikage loves B like a brother, but he is being pressured by his government to win this war. It would be an impossible choice for him. Then run, Fio said. Don't ever let this happen again. If you do that, I won't hunt you. She closed her eyes, trying to wipe away her tears. I can't speak for anyone else, but I just came here to make friends. I don't want to be that kind of person. You came to a war to make friends? The Haxabi asked, and Yotakata echoed it with the same confusion. B seemed comatose, staring down at Frost without a reaction to anything the Haxabi had said. Maybe you two would have been friends in different circumstances. You're certainly a strange one. Maybe, Fio said, feeling the connection on the edge of breaking. Yotakata, you should go back to your village. She tried to smile, and for the first time in her life failed. We could meet again. We'll see, Yotakata said hollowly. But I hope you stay safe, Fio. Thanks for saving my village. Fio nodded, and then when she next blinked she was alone in the ocean, surrounded by burning ships and floating corpses. Kome, she whispered out loud. Did we do the wrong thing? We could not have known, Komei said, and Fia felt her pushing from within for her to get up and keep moving. So now, there is no point in worrying. Go find your friends, and figure out what happens next. So despite feeling thousands of deaths in her heart weighing her down and pulling her towards the ocean's depths, Fia rose to her feet, sprouted her wings once more, and took off into the air in search of her friends. Check the description for the links to the author.